The chalk squeaked against the blackboard like it was trying to scream a warning. Dr. Felix Reynolds stepped back, his hand dusted white, his forehead damp, eyes locked onto the mass of tangled equations and loops sprawled across the board like a spiderweb of madness. Room 3B of Harvard's Department of Mathematics had seen its share of unsolvable problems, but this one was different. This one had teeth. Students watched from the edge of their seats, coffee cups forgotten, breaths held. The problem, known unofficially as conjecture delta, had outwitted the finest minds in mathematics for over a decade. It blurred the lines between number theory, topology, and chaos systems. And now Reynolds had dared the world to try and solve it. In a video posted only 2 days earlier on Harvard's YouTube channel, Reynolds had stared into the lens and said the words that would soon set off a storm. "We've tried everything. Models, simulations, brute force. No success. But maybe, just maybe, someone out there sees the world differently enough to crack it." He had offered no prize, just the weight of prestige. "Prove us wrong," he added with a tight smile. "We dare you." The internet exploded. Reddit threads went nuclear. Math forums lit up. TikTok took the audio and spun it into thousands of short clips, some funny, some sincere, most mocking. The idea of an unsolved Harvard problem turned viral curiosity. But in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, the challenge hit one person differently. 12-year-old Bomani Green wasn't supposed to be watching YouTube in the school library. He was supposed to be at recess, but recess was loud, and loud made it hard to think. The video autoplayed after another math channel he liked, and he nearly skipped it. But something about Reynolds's voice, clipped, serious, smug, made him pause. Bomani tilted his head, squinted at the chalkboard behind the man, and rewound the video to freeze-frame the equation. His fingers twitched. His heart thumped once, hard. Something was wrong with that equation. Not in the way a mistake is wrong, but in the way a magician's trick hides a mirror. Bomani saw the mirror. He didn't know how he knew that. He just did. After school, he went straight home, barely saying a word to his mom. Denise Green was used to that. Bomani was always in his head. Quiet, polite, sweet, but different. Teachers said he was advanced, which was a polite way of saying they had no idea what to do with him. In second grade, he corrected a student teacher's equation in front of the class. In third, he wrote an alternative proof for a theorem that his teacher admitted she hadn't learned until grad school. In fourth, they stopped giving him homework altogether. He needs special help, the school counselor told Denise. Not because something's wrong, but because something's more. Bomani didn't feel like more. He felt weird. Alone. His brain worked like a radio tuned to static no one else could hear. But now, staring at the frozen equation on his old laptop screen, he felt something click. The static cleared. He grabbed a Sharpie and walked straight to the wall of his bedroom. No paper, no rules. Just math. It began with small notes, terms, constants, symbols. Then lines connecting them. Then ideas, spiraling into complex functions that danced across corners and spilled onto the ceiling. Over hours, then days, the math took over the room. At school, he barely spoke. At home, he barely ate. Denise poked her head in every few hours, bringing snacks, asking gently if he was okay. He nodded. He was better than okay. He was flying. 3 nights into his obsession, he uploaded his notes, typed into a janky PDF with a diagram he drew in MS Paint, and emailed it to the address listed in the Harvard video. He didn't include a name, just a message: "You made 2 wrong assumptions in the first 7 lines. Delta folds if approached via rotational symmetry. This is what I see." His email signature was anonymous, Genius Kid 001. Back in Cambridge, Dr. Reynolds nearly deleted the message without opening it. The inbox had been flooded with trolls, cranks, and conspiracy theorists. But something about the email's tone caught his eye. It wasn't boastful. It was clean. Confident. He clicked the attachment. His brow furrowed. Then rose. Then furrowed again. Angela, he called to one of his PhD students, get in here. Angela read the file over his shoulder, her mouth tightening as she skimmed. Wait. This is suggesting rotational collapse, not forward collapse. That's new, Reynolds finished, a stunned look on his face. Completely new. Angela turned the page. And it works. Felix. It actually works. By morning, the paper had made its way to 3 other departments. 2 Nobel laureates reviewed it independently. Each returned the same verdict: whoever wrote this solved conjecture delta. Clean. Elegant. Unbelievable. The academic world buzzed. News outlets picked it up. Harvard issued a cautious press statement, citing an anonymous submission and promising further review. But by then, Reddit had already dubbed the author a modern-day Good Will Hunting. In Chicago, Bomani sat cross-legged in the dark, watching the news on his cracked phone, heart pounding as the anchor said the words he never expected to hear. An anonymous math genius may have solved one of the most complicated equations ever posted by Harvard University. The solution, now verified by multiple independent experts, appears to come from a child, possibly as young as 12. Denise stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You had something to do with this, baby. Bomani didn't look at her. Just nodded slowly. She came over and sat beside him, wrapping an arm around his narrow shoulders. You gonna tell them it was you? He was quiet for a long time. Then said softly, maybe not yet. I just wanted to know if I was good enough. Denise kissed the side of his head. You've always been good enough. Now the world's finally catching up. That night, Bomani looked at the walls of his bedroom. The symbols glowed softly in the dark. He smiled, not because of Harvard or the headlines or the chaos that was about to follow, but because, for the first time in his life, he didn't feel weird. He felt seen. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Bomani Green was born on a stormy Friday afternoon in a hospital that smelled like bleach and burnt toast. His mother, Denise, was 19 and alone, gripping the metal rails of the delivery bed like she was holding on to the edge of the world. When she finally heard him cry, her first thought wasn't about his future. It was, he sounds like he already knows something. They named him Bomani, a Swahili name that meant warrior. Denise didn't know much about Swahili, but she liked the strength in the sound. She wanted her son to be strong. The world wasn't soft for boys like him. Especially not in the part of Chicago where gunshots could be confused with fireworks and where brilliance was more of a burden than a blessing. From the moment he could hold a pencil, Bomani drew numbers. Not trucks, or dinosaurs, or stick figures like other toddlers. He filled every scrap of paper with numbers and patterns. At 4, he pointed out that the tiles in the kitchen floor followed a Fibonacci sequence. Denise didn't know what that meant, but the preschool director nearly cried when she saw his sketches. By 5, he was building equations using sidewalk chalk. By 7, he was asking questions Denise couldn't answer. If infinity is endless, why does it have a symbol? Doesn't that mean it ends somewhere? She tried Googling answers, but even the internet couldn't keep up with her son. She worked nights at the hospital as a nurse's aide. The shifts were long, and the pay was barely enough, but she always made sure Bomani had clean clothes, books to read, and a warm meal. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Their bond was built in quiet moments, her fingers combing through his tight curls while he muttered to himself, her voice humming low as he drifted off surrounded by notebooks and half-finished puzzles. School, however, wasn't built for kids like Bomani. In first grade, he corrected his teacher's math during a lesson on fractions. He wasn't trying to be rude. She'd simply made an error, and he thought she'd want to know. She didn't. From that day on, Bomani learned to keep quiet. He stopped raising his hand. He stopped making eye contact. Instead, he listened, observed, and when he got home, he worked through his own questions, building theories no one had asked him to solve. His teachers labeled him gifted early on, but that label came with its own weight. They didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't a disruption, so he got ignored. He was fast, so they gave him more busy work. He didn't act out, so they didn't see his isolation. Every year, they promised to put him in the right program next year, but next year always came with budget cuts and new staff who didn't read the notes from the last. He had few friends. Most kids didn't get him. He was quiet, intense, and more interested in prime numbers than Pokemon. He didn't mind being alone, he was used to it. What bothered him more was that no one seemed curious. They memorized formulas but never asked why they worked. They plugged in answers but never wanted to play with the questions. His closest companion, outside of his mother, was his neighbor Mr. Harlan, a retired jazz pianist who lived downstairs. Mr. Harlan saw something in Bomani that reminded him of improvisation. "Your brain's like Coltrane's fingers," he told the boy once. "Fast, wild, and always chasing something the rest of us can't quite hear yet." They played chess on Sunday mornings. Mr. Harlan let Bomani win the first few times until he realized the kid didn't need help. He was mapping moves 5 turns ahead. It made Harlan smile, sadly, sometimes, because he knew genius came with loneliness. Everywhere Bomani turned, he was told to slow down. Let the others catch up. Don't make the teacher look bad. Act your age. But what did that even mean? He wasn't trying to be older. He wasn't trying to stand out. He just couldn't help what his brain did when it saw a pattern. His mom tried her best. She fought for him at school meetings, demanded he be tested for advanced placement, argued with counselors who suggested medication. "He's not broken," she'd say. "He's just different. And different isn't wrong." But different was exhausting. Bomani carried the weight of being brilliant, black, and young in a world that didn't expect all three to come in one package. He saw the way people looked at him when he used big words or asked questions they couldn't answer. He learned when to hide it. When to pretend. When to shrink. Until Harvard. When Bomani saw the video of Dr. Reynolds and the impossible equation, something stirred in him that he hadn't felt in a long time: permission. Not from a teacher. Not from his mom. From the universe itself. It was like the equation was speaking to him in a secret language he didn't know he knew. And he wanted to answer back. For the first time, his difference didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a gift. Something powerful. Maybe even magical. The numbers on the wall of his bedroom weren't just math, they were music. A rhythm only he could hear. His mind was no longer racing alone. It was running toward something. In those long nights, as he mapped symbols and shapes in glowing ink and whispered theories into the darkness, Bomani stopped trying to be less. He let his mind stretch. He let it roar. He let it fly. And now the world was listening. The summer air in Chicago was thick and heavy, pressing against Bomani like the weight of expectations he felt every day. Since he'd stumbled onto the impossible equation Dr. Reynolds had declared unsolvable, everything had changed. It was no longer just about numbers and patterns, it was about proving something bigger. But proving it wasn't going to be easy. At school, the whispers had started. Kids who never noticed him before were now watching with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Some teachers, who once overlooked his silent genius, suddenly found reasons to keep him at arm's length. "Focus on your grade-level work," Mrs. Parker told him one day, her voice sharp. "Don't get distracted chasing dreams you can't reach." But Bomani wasn't distracted. He was determined. After school, he'd rush home, throw his backpack down, and bury himself in the pages of complex math textbooks he found online or borrowed from the library. His walls, once bare, were now covered with posters of equations, charts, and graphs scrawled in his neat handwriting. Denise worried. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, the way he barely ate dinner, the way his shoulders tensed like he was carrying the world. She wanted to step in, to tell him to slow down, but she also knew this fire was part of who he was. If she smothered it, would he lose himself? The conflict was more than just physical exhaustion. At school, the administration grew uneasy. News had reached the district office about a boy trying to solve the unsolvable. Instead of praise, they saw trouble, a distraction from standardized testing and curriculum goals. A meeting was called between Denise and the school principal, Mr. Hammond. "We appreciate your son's talents," Mr. Hammond said, eyes flicking to the stack of papers Bomani had brought in. "But there are limits to what we can accommodate here. We want to make sure he's grounded, that he doesn't get ahead of himself." Denise's jaw tightened. He's not getting ahead. He's trying to find his way. Sometimes, the principal sighed, the best way to find yourself is to follow the path already laid out. It was the first time Denise felt a real wall between Bomani's world and the one they lived in. The school wanted to contain him, to fit him in a box. But Bomani's mind refused to be boxed. At home, things weren't much easier. His older brother, Marcus, 17, was barely around. Working 2 jobs to help support the family, Marcus was exhausted, impatient, and sometimes resentful of the attention Bomani got. "Why can't you just be normal for once?" Marcus snapped one evening, slamming a door. Bomani stared at his feet, the words stinging. He didn't want to be normal. Normal was boring. But Marcus's frustration was a reminder that not everyone saw his brilliance as a gift. The tension inside the Green household grew. Denise tried to hold the peace, but between bills, work, and Bomani's growing obsession, it felt like the walls were closing in. Friends and family urged her to push Bomani to fit in, to tone it down, but she couldn't silence the voice inside her telling her to protect his fire. In the midst of the turmoil, Bomani found a rare ally in his math teacher, Ms. Ramirez. Unlike others, she saw his hunger as something precious, something worth fighting for. "I know this isn't easy," she said one afternoon after class, handing him a worn book on mathematical puzzles. "But don't let anyone dim your light. Not even the grown-ups." Her encouragement was a lifeline. With Ms. Ramirez's support, Bomani gained access to online forums and competitions, places where his ideas weren't just heard, they were celebrated. But even in these pockets of hope, he faced challenges. Many of the adults in those communities doubted a 12-year-old could really be on the edge of solving a problem Harvard deemed impossible. Emails from skeptical mathematicians filled his inbox. "Are you sure you understand the problem? This isn't a game. You're too young to tackle this." Each message was a blow, but also fuel. Bomani's resolve hardened. He spent nights hunched over his notebooks, pushing through frustration and exhaustion. He sketched, erased, recalculated, sometimes feeling like he was chasing shadows. The harder it got, the more he wanted to prove the doubters wrong. Then came the first real test. One afternoon, at a regional math competition, Bomani stood surrounded by older kids. Some in high school, some even college students. The problems were brutal, designed to weed out anyone who wasn't elite. As he tackled each question, he felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. This was what he lived for. When the results came in, Bomani had placed second, remarkable for a kid his age. The recognition was sweet but bittersweet. His victory sparked both admiration and envy. Some competitors whispered that he'd had help, others questioned his legitimacy. The murmurs spread to social media, and soon, Bomani found himself under a spotlight he never asked for. With attention came pressure. Suddenly, everyone expected him to be perfect, to have answers, to never fail. Even Denise noticed the change. Her son, once carefree in his love for math, now seemed burdened by the weight of others' expectations. One night, overwhelmed, Bomani sat alone in his room. The equation that haunted him sat in front of him on his desk, a tangled web of symbols and numbers. For the first time, doubt crept in. What if Harvard was right? What if it really was impossible? Tears slipped down his cheeks as he whispered, "Maybe I'm not the warrior I thought I was." But then he remembered Mr. Harlan's words. "Your mind is a jazz solo, Bomani. Sometimes you hit a wrong note, but the music never stops." That night, Bomani didn't give up. He let himself feel the fear, but he refused to let it win. By morning, a new determination burned inside him. The conflict wasn't just outside anymore, it was inside, too. Bomani realized he had to battle not only the world but his own fears and doubts. The path ahead was uncertain, but he would walk it anyway. Because warriors don't quit. The early morning sun spilled through the cracked blinds of Bomani's bedroom, casting stripes of gold across the scattered notebooks and scribbled papers covering his desk. Today wasn't just another day of struggling with numbers and equations. Today was the day he had to step beyond the walls of his familiar world. The world that had started to feel both confining and endlessly challenging. Today, Bomani was heading to a place that could change everything. The invitation had come unexpectedly, a chance to attend a summer program at a prestigious research institute on the outskirts of the city. It was a program usually reserved for college students, PhDs, and seasoned professionals. But something about Bomani's work had caught the eye of Dr. Reynolds, the same Harvard mathematician who had once dismissed the problem as impossible. Bomani's heart pounded as he stepped onto the bus that would take him out of the city's buzzing streets and into a world that seemed untouched by the struggles he faced daily. The hum of the engine was almost hypnotic, a steady rhythm that matched the thudding excitement in his chest. When he arrived, the campus sprawled before him like a universe he hadn't yet dared to explore. Towering buildings of glass and steel glistened in the sunlight, while meticulously manicured lawns stretched toward the horizon. The air smelled different here, cleaner, charged with possibility. He was greeted by Dr. Reynolds herself, a tall woman with a sharp gaze softened by a small, almost reluctant smile. "Welcome, Bomani. We've heard a lot about you." Despite the nerves twisting in his stomach, Bomani found himself smiling back. "Thank you for the opportunity." The first few days were a blur of introductions, lectures, and workshops. Bomani found himself surrounded by brilliant minds, some friendly, others indifferent, many skeptical. They were all so different from the kids at school, from Marcus, from Denise's worries. Here, he wasn't just a kid trying to solve a problem, he was a fellow seeker of truth. But the program wasn't just about soaking up knowledge. It was a gauntlet of challenges designed to push every participant to their limits. Bomani was thrown into complex collaborative projects, debates, and late-night brainstorming sessions that stretched into the early hours. The stakes were high, and the pressure was relentless. On one evening, exhausted and frustrated, Bomani wandered away from the group and found himself at the edge of a quiet pond on the campus. The water was still, reflecting the first stars blinking awake in the deepening sky. He sank onto a bench and let out a slow breath. "What's on your mind?" a voice asked softly. Bomani looked up to see a girl around his age, with curly hair pulled into a messy bun and bright eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Just, everything," he admitted. "This place, the work, the pressure. Sometimes I wonder if I belong here." She smiled knowingly. "You're not alone. Most of us feel like outsiders at some point. But that's what makes the journey worth it, the struggle to find where you fit in." Her name was Maya, a computer science prodigy from Seattle who loved puzzles as much as Bomani loved numbers. They quickly became friends, bonding over late-night talks and shared dreams. As the days passed, Bomani's confidence grew. The problems that had once seemed insurmountable started to look like puzzles waiting for his unique touch. He began to see patterns where others saw chaos, to hear music in the tangled web of equations. But with progress came new challenges. Dr. Reynolds pushed him harder than anyone else. "You're close, Bomani," she said one afternoon, eyes intense. "But you can't afford to get comfortable. The final step will test everything you've learned, and more." One evening, while the others worked in groups, Bomani stayed behind, scribbling furiously on a whiteboard in an empty lecture hall. The equation from home was there, a monstrous thing that no one else dared to tackle. Hours slipped by unnoticed. His hands ached, his mind blurred, but something inside told him to keep going. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Maya stepped in quietly, watching him for a moment before speaking. "You've got that look again, the one that says you're chasing something no one else sees." Bomani laughed softly. "I guess I am." She pulled up a chair. "Mind if I help?" Together, they worked through the night. Ideas bounced back and forth, questions raised and answered, doubts faced and dismantled. When the sun rose, Bomani felt something shift. The equation didn't look quite so impossible anymore. They were on the edge of something big. But just as hope flared, a message came through on Bomani's phone. A reminder of the world waiting outside the campus gates. Denise's voice, tired but firm, crackled over the call. "Bomani, we need to talk. It's about Marcus." The news hit him like a thunderclap. Marcus had been in an accident at work, and things weren't looking good. Bomani's heart twisted in panic and helplessness. Here he was, chasing impossible dreams, while his family was struggling to hold on. For the first time, the two worlds, his dreams and his reality, collided with full force. Maya's hand on his shoulder was steady. "You don't have to face this alone." In that moment, Bomani realized this journey was about more than math. It was about resilience, about balancing hope with hardship, about finding strength when everything seemed to be falling apart. He wasn't just a boy with numbers anymore. He was a fighter, for himself, for his family, for the impossible. And this was only the beginning. The news hit Bomani harder than any equation ever could. His world, already a swirling mix of numbers and dreams, suddenly felt unbearably heavy. Marcus, the brother he looked up to, the steady hand in his life, was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for survival. The very thought shattered something inside him, leaving Bomani stunned and adrift. He stood frozen in the middle of the campus, the late morning sun beating down as if mocking his helplessness. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, calls from Denise, texts from his mom, messages from friends and mentors, all drowned out by the roaring silence inside his head. The summer program, the promise of discovery, the thrill of solving the impossible, all of it seemed so distant now. How could he think about math when the man who had always been his anchor was slipping away? Dr. Reynolds noticed the change immediately. The sharp spark that once lit Bomani's eyes was dimmed. His focus wavered, his once relentless drive slowed. She called him into her office, a place filled with shelves of thick textbooks and framed accolades. Sitting across from her, Bomani felt exposed, like his worries were written all over his face. "Bomani," she began gently, "I know this is hard. But sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs come from our darkest moments. Your brother's fight isn't separate from yours. You carry that strength with you, even here." Bomani swallowed hard, tears threatening but never falling. I don't know if I can do this right now. What's the point if he doesn't make it?" Dr. Reynolds leaned forward. "The point is exactly that, hope. Your work, your passion, it's bigger than any one moment. You have a chance to prove something no one else has. Don't give up on that. For yourself. For Marcus." That night, back in his dorm room, Bomani stared at the ceiling, his mind a whirlwind of fear, grief, and determination. Maya's words from the pond echoed in his ears, the struggle to find where you fit in. But now, fitting in felt impossible. He was caught between two worlds, neither forgiving. The phone rang again. It was Denise, her voice trembling. "Marcus, he's stable for now, but it's touch and go. The doctors aren't sure what comes next." Bomani closed his eyes, fists clenched. He wanted to scream, to cry, to run home and fix everything. But he was miles away, trapped between responsibility and aspiration. The next morning, Bomani arrived late to the lab, avoiding the eyes of his peers. His notebooks lay untouched on the desk. He barely heard the discussions around him. The weight of uncertainty pressed down like a physical force. But Maya wouldn't let him retreat. She sat beside him quietly, pulling out her own notes. "Let's work through this," she said softly. Together. Their collaboration reignited a spark. With Maya's steady encouragement, Bomani began to dive back into the problem, inch by inch. The numbers and symbols that once overwhelmed him now became tools, weapons against despair. Yet, just as progress seemed possible, a new revelation struck, a discovery buried deep in the research papers that no one had noticed before. A subtle flaw in the original problem's assumptions. This wasn't just a mathematical obstacle, it was a fundamental misunderstanding. Bomani's heart raced as he pieced together the implications. The problem he had been fighting to solve wasn't impossible because of his lack of skill, it was impossible as it had been framed. But this meant something else entirely. There was a hidden path, a solution no one else had dared to see. He rushed to Dr. Reynolds, the tremor in his voice barely contained. "I think I found something. A new way to approach it." Her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and excitement. "Show me." As he explained his insight, the room crackled with energy. The tension from days of struggle lifted, replaced by a surge of hope. This was the breakthrough they'd all been waiting for. But then the phone rang again. Denise's voice came through, shaky but urgent. "Bomani, you need to come home. Marcus's condition has worsened." The juxtaposition was brutal. Triumph and tragedy, hope and fear, colliding all at once. Bomani made his decision. He packed his bags, his notebooks, his dreams, ready to face whatever came next. The journey was no longer just about proving himself, it was about holding on to the fragile thread of family, of love, of survival. As he stepped onto the bus that would take him home, Bomani looked back once at the campus fading in the distance. The impossible was still out there, waiting. But for now, his fight was here, in the hospital room, in the quiet moments between machines beeping and prayers whispered. He wasn't just solving a problem anymore. He was learning what it meant to be human, to face the unimaginable and keep going, no matter what. And in that painful, powerful realization, Bomani found his true strength. The hum of the hospital machines was a constant backdrop, a mechanical reminder of how fragile life could be. Bomani sat beside Marcus's bed, his fingers intertwined with his brother's, hoping against hope that his silent prayers would somehow reach beyond the sterile walls. The past weeks had felt like an endless storm, moments of despair punctuated by slivers of hope, but here, in this quiet room, Bomani began to understand something deeper about strength and sacrifice. It wasn't just about solving problems on paper anymore. It was about the resilience of the human spirit. Marcus's eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, their gazes locked. The smile on Marcus's face was weak but unmistakable, a flicker of the man who had always believed in Bomani. That smile, fragile yet fierce, was all the motivation Bomani needed. In the days that followed, Bomani balanced his time between the hospital and his notebooks. The problem he had once thought impossible suddenly seemed like a beacon, a challenge that reminded him why he had started in the first place. But now, it carried a new meaning. It was no longer just a puzzle to prove his intellect, it was a symbol of hope, a testament to overcoming odds. Dr. Reynolds's words echoed in his mind, "Hope fuels discovery." She had been right. Every late night in the lab, every scribbled calculation, was a way to honor Marcus's fight. Back on campus, the community that had supported Bomani rallied around him. Maya and Denise became pillars of encouragement, reminding him that he wasn't alone. The other students admired his determination, seeing in him a reflection of their own struggles and dreams. One afternoon, as Bomani pored over his latest calculations, the phone rang. It was Dr. Reynolds, her voice brimming with excitement. "Bomani, we've run simulations on your new approach. The results are promising, better than anything we've seen before." A surge of adrenaline coursed through him. "Really?" "Yes. It's not just theoretical anymore. This could change everything." The magnitude of the moment settled over Bomani. All the sacrifices, all the pain, it was leading to something bigger than he had imagined. But amidst the triumph, Bomani never forgot the lessons Marcus had taught him. Family, faith, and the courage to keep going even when the path is uncertain. Finally, the day came when Marcus was well enough to leave the hospital. Bomani was there, standing by his brother's side as they walked out together, stronger for the battles they had faced. That evening, Bomani sat at his desk, looking at the final page of his proof. The numbers aligned perfectly, the solution clear and elegant. It was a victory not just over a mathematical problem, but over every doubt, every fear that had tried to hold him back. He thought about the journey, the struggles, the friendships, the heartbreak, and the hope. The impossible had been called impossible for a reason. But Bomani had shown that with courage and perseverance, the boundaries of possibility could be stretched. As he typed the final words of his paper, he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." The story of a 12-year-old boy who dared to solve what Harvard said couldn't be solved was more than a headline. It was a testament to human potential. And as the sun set outside his window, Bomani knew one thing for certain: no matter what came next, he would face it with heart, with hope, and with the unshakable belief that anything is possible. Returning home with Marcus felt like a bittersweet victory for Bomani. The walls of his childhood room were both familiar and strange now, filled with memories of laughter and struggle, of dreams yet to be realized. Yet, the air hung heavy with expectation. He had solved the impossible, made headlines, and yet the journey ahead was still uncharted. School had started again, but everything was different. People looked at Bomani not just as the quiet kid who loved math but as a prodigy, a title that carried weight and pressure. Teachers praised him openly, classmates whispered, some with admiration, others with envy. Bomani felt their eyes, like invisible weights pulling him in different directions. At first, he tried to stay grounded, to keep living the way he always had. But the reality was unavoidable. Invitations to talk shows, interviews, and even college scouts started arriving. Suddenly, his life was no longer just about solving problems in his notebook, it was about representing a dream for an entire community. But with every new opportunity came new challenges. At school, some peers doubted his abilities, whispering that the whole thing was a fluke, that he was just lucky. Social events that used to be fun became battlegrounds of expectation. How do you stay a kid when the world expects you to be a genius? One afternoon, during math class, a heated argument broke out. Jake, a popular kid known for his arrogance, challenged Bomani publicly. "You got lucky, kid. Harvard was wrong because it's not your time. You'll see." The room fell silent. Bomani felt the sting of humiliation, but something inside him sparked. Instead of backing down, he looked Jake in the eye and said, "Maybe you're right. But I'm not done yet. Watch me." That moment marked a turning point. Bomani realized that his greatest challenge wasn't the math problem anymore, it was the battle for respect, for identity. He was no longer just solving equations, he was learning to navigate a world that wanted to put him in a box. At home, his parents saw the shift too. His mother, Karen, worried that the pressure was too much for a boy still growing up. "You're amazing, Bomani, but don't forget to live your life too," she told him one night, her voice soft but firm. His father, James, reminded him of the importance of balance. Success is great, son, but it's not everything. Keep your heart in the right place. Through these conversations, Bomani found himself questioning what success really meant. Was it the accolades, the attention, or was it something deeper, the joy of discovery, the bonds with family and friends? Maya remained his anchor. "You're more than your achievements," she said one evening as they studied together. "You're the kid who never gave up. That's what matters." With renewed clarity, Bomani threw himself into his passion with balance. He joined the school's robotics club, played basketball with friends, and even helped younger students with their homework. He discovered that life's complexities weren't just in formulas, they were in relationships, in laughter, in moments of failure and triumph. But the world outside was changing too. News outlets hailed Bomani as a symbol of hope, but there were critics as well. Some questioned whether a 12-year-old should be under so much pressure. Others argued that the problem he solved wasn't as impossible as claimed. Bomani heard it all, but he chose to focus on what mattered most: learning, growing, and staying true to himself. One chilly fall evening, as leaves swirled outside his window, Bomani sat with his family around the dinner table. For a moment, the noise of the world faded. They talked about dreams, fears, and the future. Marcus, now stronger and smiling more, looked at his little brother with pride. "Keep pushing," Marcus said. "No matter what they say." That night, Bomani lay in bed, the city lights twinkling beyond his window. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he hadn't yet imagined. But he wasn't alone. He was ready to face whatever came next. Because the impossible had already been conquered once. And now, a new journey was just beginning. The moment the email arrived, Bomani felt a jolt in his chest. It was from Harvard. The university that had once called the problem impossible was now inviting him to visit their campus. They wanted to meet him, hear more about his work, and discuss the possibilities his breakthrough opened. For a boy who had grown up dreaming about places like Harvard but never dared to imagine an invitation, the news was electrifying and terrifying all at once. When Bomani told his parents, their faces lit up with pride. His mother, Karen, hugged him tight. "This is the chance of a lifetime, Bomani. You deserve it." His father, James, nodded with a mix of pride and cautious optimism. "Remember, it's not just about proving them wrong. It's about what you do next." Preparations began in earnest. The family talked about logistics, packing, and what to expect. But no amount of planning could prepare Bomani for the whirlwind that awaited him. Stepping onto Harvard's historic campus felt surreal. The sprawling lawns, the towering brick buildings, and the chatter of brilliant minds created an atmosphere both inspiring and intimidating. Bomani's heart raced as he walked alongside his parents and Dr. Reynolds, who had agreed to accompany him as a mentor. Their first stop was the Department of Mathematics, where professors greeted Bomani warmly. Despite their earlier skepticism, the faculty now saw him not as an anomaly but as a genuine mind worth nurturing. They spoke about collaboration, future research, and opportunities that stretched beyond the horizon. One professor, Dr. Williams, took a particular interest in Bomani's work. "You have a rare gift," she said. "But gifts are just the beginning. The real journey lies in how you apply them to make a difference." Bomani nodded, absorbing every word. He felt the weight of expectation but also the thrill of possibility. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with questions he hadn't yet imagined. The visit wasn't all formalities. Harvard arranged for Bomani to meet other young prodigies and researchers, creating an environment buzzing with energy and ideas. For the first time, Bomani saw himself as part of a larger community, people who shared his passion and curiosity. But amid the excitement, there were moments of doubt. In a quiet moment alone, Bomani found himself wandering the campus gardens, feeling small beneath the towering trees. The pressure to live up to his newfound reputation pressed heavily on his shoulders. Could he really belong here? Could he keep up with the brilliant minds that surrounded him? Then, unexpectedly, he met a girl his age named Lila, a fellow young mathematician who had also made waves for her groundbreaking research in computer science. She was confident but humble, her passion for discovery infectious. They spent hours talking about their dreams, challenges, and the future. Lila's presence reminded Bomani that he wasn't alone in this journey. They shared stories of struggle and triumph, their conversations weaving a bond that eased some of his fears. Over the next few days, Harvard became more than just a place, it became a gateway to a new world of knowledge and friendship. Bomani's visit culminated in a lecture where he was invited to speak about his solution. Standing at the podium, he felt the eyes of the crowd but also a steady calm within. He spoke not just of mathematics but of hope, determination, and the power of believing in oneself. When he finished, the applause was overwhelming. But the real reward was the feeling that he had found his place. As Bomani prepared to leave, Dr. Williams pulled him aside. "Remember, Bomani, this is just the beginning. The real adventure lies ahead. Keep your mind open and your heart strong." On the flight home, Bomani stared out the window, watching the clouds drift beneath the plane. The impossible had become possible, but the road ahead promised even greater challenges. He knew that this journey would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine, but he was ready. Because with every step, Bomani was learning that greatness wasn't about being perfect, it was about embracing the unknown and daring to take the leap. And with that, a new adventure was just beginning. Coming back home from Harvard, Bomani felt like a new world had opened, but the familiar streets of his neighborhood reminded him of just how much work was left to do. The glow of his achievements still shone brightly, but shadows of doubt and challenge began creeping in, threatening to dim it. School was more intense than ever. The headlines and viral videos had transformed Bomani into a local celebrity overnight. Some students looked at him with admiration, others with jealousy, and some with skepticism. The very thing that once made him proud now felt like a heavy crown he didn't ask to wear. Teachers expected more from him, pushing harder, assigning advanced projects, and frequently calling on him in class. While it was flattering to be seen as the math genius, Bomani longed for the simplicity of just being a kid who loved numbers, not a symbol of academic success. Then there were the whispers in the hallways. Rumors started spreading that Bomani's solution had been too easy, or that he had received help from adults behind the scenes. Some questioned if his success was a fluke or a media exaggeration. One afternoon after school, a group of students cornered Bomani near the lockers. "So, you're the kid who solved Harvard's impossible problem," one sneered. "Bet you can't even handle a real challenge." Bomani felt the sting of their words but didn't let himself respond with anger. Instead, he simply said, "I'm still learning, just like everyone else." But inside, the pressure was building. It wasn't just about math anymore, it was about proving himself every day, maintaining a reputation that felt fragile. Bomani began questioning if the world's expectations were fair. Could he be more than the sum of his achievements? At home, his parents noticed the change. Karen saw the exhaustion in his eyes, and James worried about the weight Bomani carried. "You don't have to do this alone," his father reminded him gently. "We're here, every step of the way." But Bomani often kept his struggles to himself. He didn't want to seem weak or disappointing. The fear of losing what he had earned made him push harder, sometimes at the cost of his own happiness. One night, after a long day filled with tutoring younger students and extra schoolwork, Bomani sat at his desk staring at a blank page. The ideas that once flowed easily now felt tangled and distant. He realized that passion alone wasn't enough, he needed balance, support, and resilience. Maya noticed too. She pulled him aside during a break in their study session and said softly, "You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. It's okay to ask for help." Her words struck a chord. For the first time, Bomani opened up about the fears and doubts he had been hiding. The conversation wasn't just a relief, it was a reminder that he was human, capable of vulnerability and growth. Meanwhile, the media frenzy around Bomani's story intensified. Invitations came from talk shows, science fairs, and community events. Each one brought excitement but also drained his energy. It felt like he was living under a microscope, every mistake magnified, every success scrutinized. Despite the challenges, Bomani found strength in small victories. Helping a struggling student grasp a tough concept, making his parents proud, and moments of genuine laughter with Maya and friends reminded him of why he started this journey. But the road ahead was still steep. Harvard was planning a summer research program, offering Bomani a spot alongside some of the brightest young minds in the country. It was an opportunity he couldn't refuse, but the thought of leaving home and stepping even further out of his comfort zone brought new anxieties. As the days passed, Bomani faced a choice. Would he let the pressure crush him or use it as fuel to grow stronger? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain: the story of the 12-year-old who solved the impossible was far from over. With courage kindling inside, Bomani prepared to face the next chapter, one where challenges would be greater, but so would his resolve. Because sometimes, the biggest obstacles come after success, when the world watches, and the real test begins. The summer sun was blazing high over the city, but Bomani's mind was elsewhere, torn between excitement and anxiety. The invitation to Harvard's summer research program was no longer just a dream, it was a reality looming large in his life. Leaving home for weeks meant stepping into the unknown, away from the comfort of his family, friends, and the neighborhood that had shaped him. His parents tried their best to reassure him. Karen packed extra snacks and reminded him about how proud they were, while James offered advice about staying focused and true to himself. Yet, the questions swirling in Bomani's mind felt heavier than any words of encouragement. Could he fit in with kids from all over the country? Would his ideas still matter in a room full of geniuses? And most painfully, would he lose the connection to the people and places that had grounded him? The first day at Harvard felt like walking into a completely different world. The campus buzzed with activity, young minds sharing ideas, professors sparking debates, and hallways filled with the chatter of discovery. Bomani clutched his backpack tighter, his eyes wide but determined. In the orientation hall, a group of students introduced themselves, their resumes and achievements sounding like stories from another planet. There was Emily, a robotics prodigy from California, who built drones by the age of 10. There was Jason, a physics whiz from Texas, who had already published papers in scientific journals. Bomani listened, impressed but silently questioning if he truly belonged. Yet, when the program began, something unexpected happened. Bomani's unique perspective and creativity stood out. The problem he had solved, the one Harvard once called impossible, sparked conversations and inspired new approaches to ongoing research. Professors sought his input during group discussions, and students looked to him for guidance on complex puzzles. Despite the initial nerves, Bomani found himself thriving in this environment of collaboration. Late-night brainstorming sessions turned into friendships. Laughter echoed through the dorm halls, blending with passionate debates about math, science, and the future. But the pressure wasn't gone. If anything, it had multiplied. Expectations from Harvard, his family, and even himself loomed large. Every experiment that failed, every mistake, felt magnified. Bomani realized that brilliance didn't mean perfection, it meant resilience. One evening, after a particularly grueling session working on a theoretical problem, Bomani sat alone on the rooftop of his dormitory. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath him, and the quiet night offered a rare moment of peace. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the doubts, the triumphs, the sacrifices. He remembered his mother's words, "You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders." And Maya's gentle reminder that asking for help was a strength, not a weakness. At that moment, Bomani made a decision. He would lean into the uncertainty, embrace the challenges, and trust the process. He wasn't just a kid who had solved an impossible problem, he was a young scientist, a dreamer, and a fighter. Back inside, his roommate, Malik, joined him. Malik was from Chicago, a computer programming genius with a quick wit and an easy smile. You alright? Malik asked, sitting beside him. Bomani nodded. Yeah. Just thinking. Malik grinned. You're not alone. We're all figuring it out. That's what this is about. Their conversation was a turning point. Bomani realized that success wasn't a destination, it was a journey shared with others who believed in pushing boundaries and supporting one another. Over the weeks, the program challenged Bomani in ways school never had. He tackled complex equations, presented research proposals, and learned to accept constructive criticism without losing confidence. He discovered that every failure was an opportunity to learn, every setback a stepping stone. The summer wasn't without moments of homesickness. Bomani missed his family's warm dinners, the familiar streets of his neighborhood, and the comfort of Maya's friendship. But he also recognized how much he was growing, gaining skills and insights that would shape his future. Harvard's summer program ended with a showcase where students presented their projects to faculty, peers, and even media representatives. Bomani's presentation on extending his original solution to new mathematical fields was met with enthusiastic applause and questions that pushed his thinking further. Walking off the stage, Bomani felt a surge of pride. Not just in what he had accomplished, but in the person he was becoming. The shy boy who once doubted his place was now confident enough to lead, to inspire, and to dream bigger. As he packed to return home, Bomani knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more obstacles, doubts, and moments of fear. But he had learned a vital truth: greatness was not about never falling, but about rising each time with more strength. Back home, his parents greeted him with hugs and stories about the neighborhood's reaction to his summer adventure. Maya waited to hear every detail, eyes shining with admiration and excitement. Bomani smiled, feeling a deep sense of belonging. He was still the boy from his old neighborhood, but now he was also part of a larger community, a network of dreamers, thinkers, and doers. The impossible was no longer a wall but a door, one that Bomani was determined to keep opening. And as the sun set on another chapter of his life, Bomani looked forward with hope and courage, ready for whatever the future held. Coming back home from Harvard's summer research program, Bomani felt like a new chapter was beginning, but it was a chapter written with ink heavier than he had ever known. The warm welcome from his family and friends was a balm to his soul, yet beneath their proud smiles, a silent pressure loomed large. The world expected so much from him now, and he was struggling to carry the weight. The neighborhood buzzed with excitement about his success, but with that excitement came a subtle shift in how people treated him. Some saw him as a hero, a symbol of hope and possibility. Others saw a challenge, someone to compete with or doubt. Bomani's days quickly filled with invitations to speak at schools, community centers, and even local TV interviews. Each request felt like a test: could he keep up? Could he meet the expectations others placed on him? At school, the change was even more profound. Teachers called on him more frequently. Fellow students looked up to him. And sometimes away from him, wary of the pressure his presence brought. The classroom that once felt like a playground for ideas now resembled a stage where Bomani was expected to perform flawlessly. He tried to hide his fatigue and the knot of anxiety tightening inside him. Late at night, he'd lie awake wondering if he was living up to the image everyone had painted of him. Was he still Bomani, the kid who loved math simply because it made sense, or was he becoming something else, a symbol, a story, a weight to carry? His parents noticed the change. Karen tried to shield him from too much attention, suggesting breaks and quiet evenings at home. James encouraged him to keep perspective, reminding him that true success was about growth, not perfection. But Bomani felt trapped between their care and the expectations crowding his mind. At school, a new challenge emerged in the form of pressure from peers. Some were supportive, genuinely interested in his work. Others were jealous, making snide remarks about his Harvard fame and suggesting he was showing off. Bomani found himself retreating more and more during lunch breaks and free periods, preferring the solitude of the library or his bedroom. One afternoon, a group of classmates cornered him in the hallway. So, Harvard's prodigy, one said, arms crossed. Think you're better than the rest of us now? Another chimed in, must be nice, huh? Getting all the attention and all the help. Bomani didn't respond. The words stung, but he held his ground. Deep down, he knew their envy came from insecurity, not malice. Still, the incident left a mark, a reminder that fame and success could be isolating. Schoolwork became more demanding. The math problems were tougher, the science projects more complex, and the need to prove himself unrelenting. Teachers assigned him extra work, expecting him to lead group projects and set an example. While he wanted to rise to the challenge, exhaustion often followed. At home, his sanctuary sometimes felt invaded by constant calls and messages from people seeking advice or appearances. Even Maya noticed the change. One evening, as they studied together, she looked at him with concern. "Bomani, you don't have to do everything alone," she said softly. "It's okay to take a break." Her words echoed what his parents had been telling him, but it took hearing it from a friend to truly sink in. That night, Bomani lay awake reflecting on how much he had changed, not just in others' eyes, but in his own. The pressure wasn't just external, it was self-imposed. Bomani had always been driven, but now the stakes felt higher. Every mistake seemed magnified, every failure a threat to his identity. The fear of disappointing those who believed in him weighed heavily. One morning, during math class, Bomani found himself stuck on a problem he would normally solve with ease. His mind raced, but the solution eluded him. Frustration bubbled up, threatening to overwhelm him. He clenched his fists, feeling the walls closing in. Just then, his teacher, Mr. Reynolds, noticed and approached quietly. "Bomani," he said gently, "remember, even the greatest minds face challenges. It's how you handle them that matters." Those words stayed with Bomani throughout the day. He realized that pressure was inevitable, but how he responded was his choice. Later that week, Bomani decided to speak up at a school assembly. Standing before the crowd of students and teachers, he shared his journey, the triumphs, the doubts, and the weight of expectations. He spoke about the importance of resilience, humility, and community. The room was silent at first, then filled with applause. Bomani saw nods of understanding, smiles of encouragement, and felt a connection he hadn't realized he missed. His openness sparked conversations among students and teachers alike. Some shared their own struggles, others asked for advice. Bomani realized he wasn't alone, and that success didn't have to be isolating. At home, Bomani and his parents talked more openly about the challenges he faced. Karen suggested mindfulness exercises, and James helped him set boundaries with the outside world. Maya became a constant support, reminding him to laugh, relax, and enjoy moments beyond academics. Gradually, Bomani began finding balance. He learned to say no when the demands were too much and to prioritize his well-being. He embraced imperfections as part of growth, allowing himself room to breathe. The pressure didn't disappear overnight, but it became manageable, a challenge rather than a burden. Bomani's confidence grew not just from his achievements but from his ability to navigate obstacles with grace. One afternoon, while working on a new math problem with Maya, Bomani smiled and said, "You know, I think I'm starting to understand what it really means to be successful." Maya grinned back. "Yeah. What's that?" "It's not about being perfect or impressing everyone," Bomani replied. "It's about learning, growing, and staying true to who you are." As the school year progressed, Bomani continued to shine academically while nurturing his friendships and passions. He volunteered at community centers, helping younger kids discover the joy of learning. He joined the school's debate team, sharpening his voice and confidence. Through it all, the lessons of humility, resilience, and connection stayed at the heart of his journey. Bomani realized that being the boy who solved Harvard's impossible problem was just one part of a much bigger story, one about courage, love, and the power to inspire others. Looking ahead, Bomani knew challenges awaited. But now, with a stronger sense of self and a support system to lean on, he felt ready. The weight of expectation still pressed, but it no longer crushed him. Instead, it fueled a fire within, a fire to keep reaching, keep dreaming, and keep shining. Because sometimes, the greatest triumph is learning to carry your own story with pride and grace. The summer sun poured through the windows of Bomani's bedroom as he sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by notebooks, textbooks, and scribbled sheets of paper. The familiar weight of the problem still rested heavily on his shoulders. Solving Harvard's impossible math challenge had made him a local hero, but the victory had opened doors to new challenges, doors Bomani wasn't sure he was ready to walk through just yet. After the school year's whirlwind, summer break was supposed to be a time of rest. Instead, Bomani found himself grappling with fresh expectations and a growing sense of uncertainty about his future. The community's pride, the spotlight's glare, even his own ambitions, they all pressed down like an invisible burden. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from mentors, local reporters, and even college recruiters. Opportunities, they called it. But to Bomani, it sometimes felt like a cage, tightly wrapped around his freedom. He stared out the window at the street below where neighborhood kids played basketball, laughter echoing through the afternoon air. A pang of longing swept through him. He missed the carefree days before all this attention, before he was known as the kid who solved the impossible. Yet, deep inside, Bomani knew this was only the beginning. The problem he had cracked was a stepping stone, not a destination. His passion for mathematics and problem-solving burned brighter than ever, but so did a quiet voice inside him whispering doubts. Could he keep up? Could he truly live up to the promise so many now saw in him? One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Bomani sat with his parents at the dinner table. The familiar clatter of plates and soft hum of conversation usually brought comfort, but tonight, tension lingered unspoken. Bomani, his father James said carefully, I know people expect a lot from you. But remember, it's okay to take your time. You don't have to have it all figured out. Karen nodded in agreement. We're proud of you no matter what. Your happiness matters more than any achievement. Bomani smiled weakly, grateful for their support but feeling the pressure still tightening like a coil in his chest. I want to make a difference. I want to show everyone that this whole journey, means something. James reached across the table, placing a steady hand on his son's arm. And it does. One step at a time. That night, Bomani's thoughts drifted to Maya. She had been his anchor through so much. The laughter, the late-night talks, the steady friendship that never demanded perfection. He decided to call her. Hey, Maya answered after a few rings. Her voice was warm, familiar. Hey, Bomani replied. I'm feeling kind of lost right now. Like, I don't know where to go next. Maya was silent for a moment. I get it. It's scary when everything changes all at once. But you don't have to figure it all out right away. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is just keep moving forward, one step, one problem, one day at a time. Her words, simple yet profound, settled something inside him. Maybe he didn't have to have all the answers now. Maybe it was okay to stumble, to question, and to grow. Over the next few weeks, Bomani immersed himself in projects that connected math to real-world problems. He volunteered at a local community center, teaching kids how to find joy in numbers, just like he had. Seeing their eyes light up when they grasped a concept reminded him why he loved this journey in the first place. But even in these moments of joy, doubts lingered. At a summer math camp hosted by a prestigious university, Bomani encountered peers who had already achieved remarkable feats. Their confidence sometimes bordered on arrogance, their conversations filled with jargon and proofs he hadn't yet mastered. During one group session, a senior student dismissed Bomani's approach to a complex problem. That's cute, he said with a smirk, but it's not how serious mathematicians solve it. The word stung, and for the first time in months, Bomani felt small. He wondered if the kid who solved Harvard's impossible problem was just a fluke, a lucky accident rather than a true prodigy. That night, alone in his dorm room, Bomani stared at the ceiling. He remembered Mr. Reynolds's words, "Even the greatest minds face challenges. It's how you handle them that matters." Could he handle this? Determined not to let self-doubt win, Bomani spent hours reviewing the problem, exploring new methods, and seeking guidance from his mentors. Slowly, the fog began to lift. He realized that growth came from struggle, and no one had it all figured out, no matter how brilliant they seemed. One afternoon, while working on a particularly challenging proof, Bomani had a breakthrough. The solution wasn't just about raw intelligence but about creativity and perseverance. His confidence grew not because he was flawless but because he refused to give up. Back home for a brief visit, Bomani shared his experiences with his parents and Maya. "It's hard," he admitted, "but I'm learning that the journey is more important than the destination." Maya smiled. "That's real wisdom, Bomani." His parents beamed with pride. "We're here every step," Karen said, squeezing his hand. "No matter what." As summer turned to fall, Bomani returned to school with a renewed sense of purpose. He balanced academics, mentorship, and community work with a deeper understanding of himself. He wasn't just the boy who solved a big problem, he was a young man growing into his potential, embracing challenges, doubts, and victories alike. The pressure hadn't vanished, but Bomani had learned to carry it with grace. He no longer saw himself as a symbol alone but as a person. Flawed, hopeful, and determined. One evening, as he walked home under a sky streaked with stars, Bomani paused to reflect. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but he was ready to keep walking it. After all, the impossible had already been solved once. Maybe, just maybe, he could help solve many more things, both in math and in life. With a deep breath, Bomani smiled. The future was waiting, and he was no longer afraid. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The crisp autumn air filled the halls of Lincoln Middle School as Bomani walked through the crowded corridors. The familiar buzz of chatter, lockers slamming, and sneakers squeaking on linoleum floors felt comforting in a way he hadn't experienced in months. After the whirlwind summer, Bomani was back in his routine, back to school, back to classes, back to the reality that the world outside the math problems was complicated in its own way. But something had shifted inside him. Despite the applause and recognition he had received, Bomani realized that his biggest challenge wasn't the math problems or the accolades, it was the battle within himself. The doubt that had crept into his mind at the summer camp, the fear of not being good enough, and the pressure of living up to everyone's expectations had followed him back to school. In homeroom, his best friend Jalen nudged him, whispering, "Yo, man, you good? You've been kinda quiet lately." Bomani forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." Jalen raised an eyebrow but didn't push. He knew Bomani had a lot on his plate. As the day unfolded, Bomani's teachers treated him differently now, more eyes watching, more expectations weighing down. In math class, Mrs. Carter handed him a problem that even she admitted was challenging, expecting him to solve it quickly. Instead, Bomani hesitated, unsure of his approach. The eyes of his classmates felt like a spotlight, and for the first time, he felt the sting of uncertainty in front of his peers. After class, Bomani retreated to the library, burying himself in books. He wanted to prove to himself that he could keep up, that the summer's doubts were just temporary shadows. But the harder he tried, the heavier the pressure seemed. His phone buzzed, a message from Maya popped up. "Meet me at the park after school. Need to talk." The park had been their sanctuary for years, a place where the world slowed down and the noise faded away. Bomani agreed without hesitation. When they met, Maya looked concerned. "Bomani, you've been pushing yourself too hard. You don't have to be perfect all the time." "I know," Bomani said, his voice low. But it's hard. Everyone expects me to be this genius kid who never messes up. I'm scared of letting them down. Maya nodded thoughtfully. That's a lot for anyone, especially someone your age. But you're more than one achievement. You're Bomani, the kid who cares, who fights, who doesn't give up. Her words hit home. For the first time, Bomani allowed himself to admit that the pressure was overwhelming. The fear of failure, of disappointing those who believed in him, was a constant shadow. That night, Bomani lay awake, replaying the day's moments. He realized that the challenge wasn't just academic, it was emotional. The journey to greatness was as much about understanding himself as it was about solving equations. The next morning, Bomani decided to face his fears head-on. During lunch, he gathered a few classmates and shared his struggles. To his surprise, many opened up about their own pressures, academic, social, family-related. The vulnerability created a bond, a reminder that no one was alone in their battles. Inspired by this connection, Bomani proposed starting a support group at school, a safe space where students could share challenges and encourage each other. The idea was met with enthusiasm, and soon, the Growth Club was born. In the weeks that followed, Bomani discovered that leadership was more than being the smartest in the room, it was about listening, empathy, and courage to be imperfect. Helping others navigate their struggles gave him strength to face his own. At home, his parents noticed a change. "You look lighter, Bomani," Karen said one evening. "Like you're carrying less weight." "I am," he admitted. "I realized that I don't have to do it all alone." Even Mr. Reynolds, his mentor, praised the initiative. "That's where real growth happens, Bomani. Not just in solving problems, but in building people up." But the road wasn't without setbacks. One afternoon, during a math competition, Bomani stumbled on a question he couldn't answer. The room fell silent. He felt the familiar pang of doubt creeping back. Later, as he walked home, he questioned himself. Was he really the prodigy everyone claimed? Or was he just lucky once? That evening, his father joined him for a walk. "You know," James said, "every great mind has faced moments like this. The question isn't if you'll fail, it's what you do afterward." Bomani looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle in the night sky. "I want to be better. Not just at math, but at handling all this." James smiled. "And you will be. One day at a time." With renewed resolve, Bomani returned to his studies, to his friends, to the community that had lifted him. The internal battle was far from over, but he now understood that strength came not from never falling, but from rising each time he did. As autumn deepened, Bomani's story was no longer just about solving impossible problems, it was about embracing the challenge within and discovering the resilience that lay at the heart of every true achievement. The chill of early winter was settling over the city, frosting the windows and biting at the edges of Bomani's coat as he stepped off the bus near Lincoln Middle School. The days had grown shorter, but the challenges Bomani faced seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of him, like a mountain yet to be climbed. Despite the progress he'd made, he knew his journey was far from over. In fact, the hardest part was just beginning. Returning to school after the holiday break, Bomani noticed an undercurrent of change around him. The teachers, once hesitant and unsure how to approach the young prodigy, now watched him with a new respect. Whispers of his summer achievement at Harvard summer camp had spread through the halls, creating an aura of both admiration and, to Bomani's surprise, a bit of envy. He'd hoped that with recognition came ease. Instead, the spotlight seemed to magnify every misstep, every moment of doubt. His classmates, some inspired by his success, others feeling overshadowed, treated him differently. Some invited him into conversations he once couldn't imagine joining, others looked away or murmured when he entered the room. Bomani found himself navigating these complex social currents while still wrestling with the ever-present pressure to perform academically. The Growth Club, which he had helped start, became his refuge, a place to find understanding amid the storm. But even there, tensions brewed beneath the surface. One afternoon, during a club meeting, a heated discussion erupted about who deserved recognition and how success should be measured. Some students argued that only perfect grades mattered, while others, inspired by Bomani's example, believed perseverance and growth were equally important. Bomani tried to mediate, but the voices grew louder, the divisions sharper. It was a reminder that even in a place built on support, human emotions and insecurities could still fracture unity. Outside school, Bomani's family faced their own challenges. His mother, Karen, was juggling a second job to keep the household afloat. His father, James, was wrestling with an injury that threatened his position at the local warehouse. The financial strain added another layer of worry Bomani carried, though he tried to shield his parents from his own struggles. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Bomani sat at the kitchen table surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, trying to focus on a math problem that refused to yield. The numbers blurred together, the logic slipping through his fingers like water. His little sister, Amara, toddled in, clutching a crumpled drawing she'd made. "Look, Bomani," she said, her eyes wide with pride. "I made this for you." It was a colorful scribble of stars, rockets, and a figure in the middle labeled, Bomani, the star solver. Bomani's lips curled into a tired smile. "Thanks, Amara. This is amazing." Her innocent joy reminded him of why he fought so hard, not just for the accolades or the recognition, but for those who believed in him, for those who depended on him. The following day, a letter arrived from Harvard's math department. They were inviting Bomani to join a special mentorship program designed for young talents like him. It was an incredible opportunity, but it also meant more time away from home, more pressure, and a new environment filled with older, more experienced students. Bomani wrestled with the decision. Accepting meant stepping even further outside his comfort zone. It meant balancing school, family, and the growing expectations on his young shoulders. After a long night of thinking and talking with his parents, Bomani decided to accept. "I want to see how far I can go," he told them. "I want to keep learning, even if it's hard." The mentorship program was unlike anything Bomani had experienced. The other students were brilliant, confident, and sometimes intimidating. The problems they tackled went beyond anything he had seen before: abstract theories, complex algorithms, and puzzles that required creativity as much as logic. At first, Bomani felt like an outsider, doubting if he belonged among these bright minds. But his mentors noticed his determination and unique approach to problem solving. They encouraged him to trust his instincts, to embrace mistakes as stepping stones rather than failures. One mentor, Professor Collins, became a particularly important figure. She saw in Bomani not just raw talent, but a rare curiosity and resilience. "Remember," she said during one session, "math isn't just about finding the right answer. It's about asking the right questions." Under her guidance, Bomani's confidence began to grow. He started to participate more actively, sharing ideas and even challenging some established theories. His curiosity became his strength. Meanwhile, back at school, the Growth Club continued to evolve. Inspired by Bomani's experiences, members began to initiate community projects, tutoring younger students, organizing workshops, and raising awareness about mental health and academic pressure. Bomani found fulfillment in these activities. He realized that his impact went beyond his personal achievements. He was helping to create a culture where students felt safe to struggle and grow together. But the intense schedule began to take a toll. Balancing mentorship sessions, schoolwork, family responsibilities, and the club was exhausting. Bomani's grades started to slip slightly, and the stress began to manifest in headaches and restless nights. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging day, Bomani sat alone in the school courtyard, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. He questioned if he was truly capable of sustaining this pace, if the dream he chased was worth the toll. Just then, Maya approached, her expression gentle but serious. "Bomani, you've been pushing too hard," she said softly. "It's okay to slow down, to take care of yourself." Her words struck a chord. Bomani realized he'd been so focused on proving himself that he'd neglected his own well-being. The pressure to succeed had blinded him to the need for balance and rest. That evening, he talked openly with his parents about the struggles he'd been hiding. They reminded him that success wasn't just about achievements but about being healthy and happy. James shared stories of his own youth, of times when he felt overwhelmed and had to learn the hard way to ask for help. With their support, Bomani began to adjust his schedule. He prioritized sleep, took breaks, and allowed himself moments of joy beyond school and math. He rediscovered simple pleasures, playing basketball with Jalen, reading comic books, and spending time with Amara. The mentorship program continued, but Bomani approached it with a new mindset. He wasn't just trying to prove something to the world, he was learning for himself, exploring new ideas at his own pace. As winter deepened, Bomani found a renewed sense of purpose. The journey was no longer about racing toward a finish line but about growing steadily, embracing challenges, and learning to thrive amid uncertainty. His story, once focused narrowly on a single mathematical achievement, was becoming a richer tapestry, woven with friendship, family, struggle, and hope. He knew the road ahead would still have obstacles, but Bomani was ready to face them with courage, resilience, and a heart open to new possibilities. The new semester brought with it a fresh set of challenges. Bomani was no stranger to pressure, but nothing quite prepared him for what lay ahead. The Harvard mentorship program was demanding more than ever, and the expectations at school continued to mount. Yet, amid all this, an unexpected challenge began to take shape, one that tested not just Bomani's intellect but his ability to trust those around him. It all started with a group project assigned in Bomani's advanced math class. The project was to develop a novel approach to a long-standing problem in combinatorics, something Bomani was excited to tackle. The teacher, Mrs. Jacobs, paired him with two classmates he barely knew, Liam, a confident but guarded boy from a wealthy family, and Zoe, a sharp and outspoken girl who was known for her competitive streak. Bomani was cautious but hopeful. He knew that working with others was crucial to growth, even though it sometimes meant navigating difficult personalities. From the very first meeting, however, it became clear this project wouldn't be easy. Liam took charge quickly, directing the discussion and dismissing some of Bomani's ideas before they were fully explained. Zoe pushed aggressively, challenging everyone's assumptions and often clashing with Liam. Bomani found himself in the middle, trying to keep the peace while also fighting to be heard. The tension escalated when Bomani suggested a new approach inspired by his summer research with Professor Collins, an idea that deviated from the conventional methods Liam and Zoe preferred. Liam scoffed at it, calling it unrealistic, and Zoe warned that it was a waste of time. Frustrated, Bomani kept quiet for the rest of that meeting. He felt sidelined, his confidence shaken. But deep down, he believed in his approach and decided to keep working on it independently. Outside of school, the pressure didn't ease. The mentorship program required Bomani to submit weekly progress reports and attend virtual meetings with other young mathematicians and their mentors. The assignments grew increasingly complex, demanding more time and mental energy. At home, Karen's exhaustion was more visible than ever. She often stayed up late working second jobs, and James's injury was slow to heal. Bomani tried to help where he could, running errands and looking after Amara, but the strain was unmistakable. One night, after an especially long day of juggling schoolwork and mentorship tasks, Bomani found himself back at his desk, poring over his combinatorics problem. He sketched diagrams, scribbled formulas, and ran simulations on his laptop. The room was silent except for the hum of the heater and the scratch of his pencil. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled him. It was Maya, carrying a warm cup of tea. "You should take a break," she said softly. "You're working too hard." Bomani shook his head. "I can't. I'm stuck, but I think I'm close." Maya smiled. "You always say that. But sometimes, stepping away helps you see things clearer." Her advice struck a chord. Bomani closed his notebook and stepped outside into the crisp night air. The stars sparkled above, a reminder of the vast universe beyond his problems. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe, to feel the calm. Back in school, the group project's tension finally boiled over. During a heated meeting, Liam accused Bomani of not being a team player, claiming he worked in isolation and refused to share ideas. Zoe sided with Liam, and Bomani felt the sting of betrayal. The argument ended abruptly when Mrs. Jacobs intervened, reminding them that collaboration was the heart of the assignment. She encouraged them to find common ground and scheduled a mediation session with the school counselor. The mediation was a turning point. Each student shared their frustrations and listened to the others. Bomani admitted his fear that his ideas would be dismissed. Liam confessed his insecurity about being overshadowed. Zoe revealed her fear of failure, which fueled her competitiveness. Slowly, they began to understand each other. They agreed to combine their approaches, blending Liam's traditional methods, Zoe's critical eye, and Bomani's innovative ideas. Meanwhile, Bomani's mentorship sessions introduced a new challenge, a team competition with students from around the world. His team's task was to solve a series of problems that required not only mathematical skill but also clear communication and trust. At first, Bomani struggled. He was used to working independently, relying on his own instincts. Now, he had to coordinate with peers he'd never met in person, some with different accents, cultural backgrounds, and ways of thinking. One teammate, a boy from India named Arjun, suggested an approach that conflicted with Bomani's ideas. Initially, Bomani resisted, unsure whether to push back or yield. The tension reminded him of the conflict with Liam and Zoe. Professor Collins encouraged the team to hold a video call to discuss their differences openly. During the call, Bomani shared his perspective honestly, but also listened carefully to Arjun's reasoning. They found common ground and agreed on a hybrid solution. This experience taught Bomani a vital lesson: trust wasn't about always agreeing or following one's own way. It was about respecting others' insights and being open to change. Back at home, things grew even more complicated. James's injury led to him losing his job. The financial pressure mounted, and the family was forced to make tough decisions. Bomani felt the weight of responsibility. He secretly started tutoring younger students in math to help with expenses, sometimes sacrificing his own study time. He kept this hidden from his parents, not wanting to add to their worries. One afternoon, while tutoring a small group, Bomani noticed how much joy and confidence the kids gained from learning. It reminded him why he loved math beyond competitions and awards. It was about sharing knowledge and inspiring others. This realization reinvigorated his spirit. He began organizing informal math sessions at school, inviting students of all levels to join. The sessions became popular, bridging gaps between different groups and creating a supportive environment. Despite the growing demands, Bomani maintained his commitment to the group project. The team finally completed their presentation, blending their diverse ideas into a cohesive whole. Mrs. Jacobs praised their collaboration and originality. At the project's unveiling, Bomani felt a surge of pride as his classmates applauded. The experience taught him that success was not just personal but collective. Trust, communication, and compromise were as important as intelligence. However, the real test came during the international mentorship competition. Bomani's team faced setbacks, a miscommunication cost them crucial points, and frustration threatened to tear them apart. Late one night, Bomani took the initiative to call a team meeting. He apologized for any misunderstandings and emphasized their shared goal. His sincerity inspired the group, and they renewed their efforts with a stronger bond. In the final round, Bomani's team solved the toughest problem, earning them second place overall. It wasn't first, but the experience of working together and overcoming obstacles was a victory in itself. Reflecting on the past months, Bomani realized how much he'd grown, not just as a mathematician but as a person. He had learned the power of trust, the value of listening, and the strength found in community. The challenges hadn't disappeared, but Bomani now faced them with a deeper understanding. He was no longer the solitary genius struggling alone, he was part of a network, a team, a family. As spring approached, Bomani looked forward to the next phase of his journey, ready to embrace whatever came with courage and an open heart. Spring was finally arriving in Boston, but for Bomani, the warmth outside did little to ease the chill of uncertainty that had settled in his heart. The excitement of the mentorship program's competition was behind him, yet a new and more daunting challenge awaited, one that would test everything he had learned about perseverance, trust, and breaking through barriers that seemed immovable. In the days following the competition, word had begun to spread about Bomani's unique approach to the problem that Harvard had once deemed impossible. His name was whispered with a mix of awe and skepticism in academic circles. Invitations arrived, some genuine, others laced with doubt, from universities and research groups interested in his work. But with those opportunities came scrutiny. One afternoon, Bomani received an email that left him breathless. It was from a prestigious math research team at a top university, inviting him to collaborate on an advanced project. This was the kind of chance most young mathematicians dreamed of, but there was a catch. The project was notoriously complex, with a history of failures and refusals by top experts. Worse, the team was known for its high-pressure environment and exacting standards. The invitation was both a promise and a challenge. Bomani felt the thrill of potential success, but also the sting of imposter syndrome. Could a 12-year-old from a modest neighborhood truly hold his own in such a high-stakes world? The doubts gnawed at him, but he knew deep down that this was his moment. At school, the pressure intensified. His peers, some of whom had doubted him, now looked on with a mix of curiosity and envy. Even Liam and Zoe, once adversaries in their group project, approached him with cautious respect. The shift was subtle but noticeable. The boy who once felt invisible was now under a spotlight he hadn't asked for. Karen and James, proud but concerned, urged Bomani to remember balance. "Don't lose yourself chasing this," Karen warned gently during a rare quiet evening at home. "Your health and happiness matter just as much as your achievements." Bomani nodded, but the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. With James's injury still limiting his ability to work and Karen juggling multiple jobs, Bomani was acutely aware that his success was tied to his family's well-being. He wanted to lift them up, to prove that their sacrifices were not in vain. He accepted the university's offer and prepared for the first meeting with the research team. The night before, his mind raced with questions and fears. What if he wasn't smart enough? What if they dismissed his ideas? What if he failed? The next morning, Bomani stepped into the sleek, modern conference room where the team gathered. The room buzzed with intensity, filled with scholars in crisp suits and thick glasses, laptops open, ready for rigorous debate. At the center was Dr. Emily Carter, a renowned mathematician known for her sharp intellect and demanding nature. "Welcome, Bomani," Dr. Carter said, her voice calm but authoritative. "We've heard about your work. This project has defeated many. We'll see if you can bring something new." Bomani swallowed hard but kept his composure. He presented his ideas clearly, weaving the innovative methods he had developed with Professor Collins. The room grew quiet as the team listened intently. Questions followed, difficult, probing, sometimes skeptical, but Bomani responded with confidence and honesty. Over the next several weeks, Bomani immersed himself in the project. The work was grueling. Long hours, complex calculations, and moments of doubt tested his resolve. But unlike before, Bomani was no longer isolated. Dr. Carter became a mentor figure, pushing him hard but offering guidance. The team, initially distant, began to respect his insights and perseverance. Yet, breaking into this elite circle wasn't just about intellect. It was about navigating unspoken social codes and overcoming biases. Bomani noticed subtle microaggressions, dismissive glances, interrupted sentences, and assumptions about his background. He realized that being young and black in a predominantly white, adult environment added layers of challenge beyond the math itself. One evening, after a particularly tough day, Bomani confided in Dr. Carter. Sometimes it feels like I'm not just solving equations but fighting to be seen and heard, he admitted. Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. That's the reality for many who break barriers, Bomani. But your voice matters. Don't let them silence it. Empowered by her words, Bomani grew bolder. He spoke up more in meetings, challenged flawed assumptions, and insisted on the value of diverse perspectives. His presence began to change the team's dynamic, fostering a more open and collaborative atmosphere. Outside the university, Bomani's story caught the attention of local media. A reporter from a prominent newspaper interviewed him, capturing his journey from a curious boy in a tough neighborhood to a young genius challenging Harvard's verdict. The article painted Bomani not just as a prodigy but as a symbol of hope and determination. At school, the attention brought new opportunities but also new pressures. Some classmates looked to him for guidance, while others felt threatened or jealous. Bomani struggled to maintain normal friendships amidst the whirlwind of expectations. His math sessions continued to grow, with more students eager to learn from him. Bomani found joy in teaching, in breaking down complex ideas into simple truths that anyone could grasp. It reminded him why he loved math in the first place, not for fame or accolades, but for connection. Yet, the project demanded his focus. As the team neared a breakthrough, tensions flared. Differences in approach, clashing personalities, and the looming fear of failure threatened to derail progress. In a pivotal meeting, a heated debate erupted between Bomani and one senior researcher who questioned the validity of Bomani's methods. Voices rose, accusations flew, and the room grew tense. Bomani felt his heart pound. But instead of retreating, he calmly presented his data, addressing every critique with evidence and clarity. The room fell silent, then nodded in reluctant acknowledgement. Dr. Carter praised his composure. You've earned your place here, Bomani. Keep pushing. Days later, the breakthrough came, a solution that no one had imagined possible. The team celebrated, but Bomani knew the real victory was more profound. He had broken through invisible walls, prejudice, doubt, fear, and proved that talent and determination could transcend barriers. At home, Karen and James embraced him with tears of pride. You're our hero, James said, his voice choked with emotion. Bomani smiled, humbled but proud. He had come a long way from the boy who once doubted himself, and he knew the journey was far from over. As spring turned to summer, Bomani prepared for the next chapter, sharing his discoveries with the world and inspiring others to break their own barriers. The world was watching now. After the breakthrough with the university research team, Bomani's life changed overnight. Headlines across newspapers and online platforms hailed the 12-year-old prodigy who had shattered what Harvard had called impossible. For Bomani, the recognition was overwhelming, a whirlwind of cameras, interviews, and invitations to speak before audiences that once seemed like distant dreams. Yet, beneath the surface of public acclaim, Bomani grappled with the shadows of doubt, exhaustion, and the weight of expectation. It all began with a televised interview. Sitting under bright studio lights, Bomani's calm voice belied the nerves twisting in his stomach. The interviewer asked the questions he had prepared for 100 times, yet somehow they always felt different when spoken aloud. How does it feel to solve a problem Harvard declared impossible? The reporter asked. Bomani smiled politely and said, it's proof that with curiosity and determination, anything is possible. The interview went viral. Suddenly, Bomani was no longer just a kid from the city, he was a symbol, a beacon for those who had been overlooked or underestimated. Messages poured in from all over the country. Kids his age, and adults too, wrote about how his story inspired them to keep pushing, even when things seemed impossible. But fame brought new pressures. School was harder to navigate with cameras on his doorstep. The hallways buzzed with whispers, some filled with admiration, others tinged with envy. His teachers treated him differently, some with more support, others with unrealistic expectations. And his friends? Some drifted away, uncomfortable with the changes, others hung around, unsure if they could still connect with the boy who had become a public figure. Even his family noticed the shift. Karen worried about the toll the spotlight was taking on Bomani's mental health. "You're still just a kid," she reminded him one evening as they sat at their kitchen table, the sounds of the city faint beyond the window. "Don't let the world rush you into growing up too fast." James, though quieter, shared her concern. "Fame can be a heavy burden," he said, his voice steady but serious. Bomani nodded, understanding their worries but also feeling a fierce determination to seize the moment. He knew opportunities like this didn't come often, and he wanted to make the most of every one. The next few weeks were a blur. Invitations to speak at schools, universities, and conferences kept him traveling across the state. Each event demanded that he not only share his story but also explain complex mathematical concepts in ways that anyone could understand. It was exhausting but also exhilarating. Bomani discovered a passion for teaching, not just solving problems, but helping others see the beauty in math. Yet, behind the scenes, Bomani struggled with the loneliness that often accompanies fame. The constant scrutiny made it hard to trust new people. Was someone reaching out because they genuinely cared, or just because of his success? The question haunted him, creating an invisible barrier around his heart. At school, the spotlight also brought new conflicts. A group of older students began to challenge him openly, their words sharp with jealousy. "You think you're better than us now," one sneered during lunch. Another added, "Must be nice to have everyone kissing your feet." Bomani tried to ignore them, but the taunts chipped away at his confidence. One afternoon, after a particularly harsh confrontation, he found himself alone in the school library, staring at a problem on his notebook that suddenly seemed impossible to solve. The weight of expectations pressed down, threatening to crush the joy he once found in math. It was Zoe who found him there, sitting quietly with his head in his hands. She had once been a rival, but over time, their relationship had softened into a cautious friendship. "Hey," she said softly, sliding into the seat beside him. "You don't have to carry all this alone." Bomani looked up, surprised by her kindness. "It's just, everyone expects me to be perfect. To never fail." Zoe smiled, her eyes kind but serious. "Nobody's perfect. Even the smartest people mess up. It's how you get back up that counts." Her words reminded Bomani of his early days, when every failure was a lesson, not a burden. He realized that he had been so focused on pleasing others that he had forgotten why he loved math in the first place, the thrill of discovery, the joy of problem solving. That evening, Bomani sat down with Karen and James and shared his feelings. They listened without judgment, offering support and encouragement. "You're doing something incredible," Karen said. "But don't lose sight of yourself." James added, "You're more than your achievements, Bomani. Your heart, your kindness, that's what truly matters." Their words grounded him, giving Bomani the strength to face the challenges ahead. At the same time, Bomani began to reflect on the bigger picture. His journey was no longer just about solving math problems. It was about breaking barriers for others like him. He thought about the kids in his neighborhood who had never been given the chance to dream big, who faced obstacles that felt insurmountable. He wanted his success to open doors for them, to show that where you come from doesn't define where you can go. With this new purpose, Bomani reached out to community organizations and local schools, volunteering to run workshops and tutoring sessions. Teaching others became his way of giving back, and it filled him with a sense of fulfillment that no award or headline ever could. But even as Bomani embraced his role as a mentor and advocate, the spotlight continued to shine relentlessly. Media appearances became more frequent, with some interviews veering into invasive territory, questions about his family's struggles, his race, and the pressure he faced. Bomani learned to navigate these with grace, but the emotional toll was undeniable. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting day of interviews, Bomani found himself wandering the city streets alone, seeking solace. The familiar sights of his neighborhood, the corner store, the basketball court, the murals painted by local artists, reminded him of where he came from and why he fought so hard. He paused by a mural depicting a powerful image of a young boy reaching for the stars, painted by a community artist inspired by his story. The words beneath it read, "Dream big. Break barriers. Be the change." Tears welled up in Bomani's eyes. The journey had been far from easy, but every challenge had shaped him into the person he was becoming. As the sun set behind the city skyline, Bomani made a silent promise to himself, to keep pushing forward, not just for his own success, but to light the way for others who dared to dream. And with that, he turned back toward home, ready to face whatever the future held. After the whirlwind of fame and attention, Bomani felt the intense pressure settle on his young shoulders like a heavy cloak. The world had moved from admiring the boy genius to expecting him to perform miracles constantly. Everywhere he went, people looked at him not just as Bomani, the 12-year-old with a gift for math, but as a symbol of possibility, a living example of breaking barriers. And that was a lot to live up to. The early excitement had started to fade, replaced by a deep sense of responsibility. Bomani understood that his success wasn't just about solving a problem, it was about what he represented, to kids like him, to his community, and even to the wider world. That was an enormous burden. His daily life was no longer simple. At school, his classmates and teachers expected him to excel in every subject, to be the model student all the time. His schedule was packed, balancing schoolwork, tutoring sessions he volunteered for, public appearances, and countless interviews. Most nights, Bomani went to bed exhausted, his mind racing with numbers and equations instead of sleep. One Monday morning, Bomani sat in his math class staring at a complex problem on the board. The room buzzed with quiet conversation, but his mind was elsewhere, overwhelmed by thoughts of the upcoming science fair, the community workshop he had to organize, and the family dinner he needed to prepare for. His teacher, Mr. Caldwell, called on him. "Bomani, can you solve this for us?" Mr. Caldwell asked, pointing at the problem. All eyes turned to him. Bomani took a deep breath, but the answer that usually came so quickly was stuck somewhere inside his head. He hesitated, then stammered, I need a moment." Whispers erupted in the room. Some students exchanged surprised looks, others nodded knowingly. Bomani felt a wave of shame and frustration. It was the first time he had stumbled like this in front of his peers. After class, a few kids approached him. Marcus, one of the students who had been less than kind lately, smirked. "Even the genius messes up," he said, loud enough for others to hear. The word stung. Bomani clenched his fists but said nothing. He walked away, feeling smaller than he had in a long time. That evening, he sat with his family at the dinner table, the silence heavy. Karen noticed his downcast eyes. "What's going on, Bomani?" she asked gently. He shrugged, trying to hide the embarrassment. "It's just hard to keep up with everything. Everyone expects me to be perfect all the time." James looked up from his plate, nodding slowly. "Nobody's perfect, Bomani. Not even you. You don't have to carry that weight alone." Karen reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're still a kid. It's okay to have bad days, to ask for help." But Bomani's mind raced. If he slowed down, if he faltered, would the world turn its back on him? Would the promise of breaking barriers crumble under the pressure? The next morning, Bomani woke up feeling restless. The news had picked up a new story. Some critics questioned if his achievement was just a fluke, or if the adults around him had done most of the work. Social media was flooded with both praise and harsh criticism. It was the kind of attention he hadn't anticipated. He tried to focus on his homework, but every notification on his phone pulled him deeper into a swirl of emotions, doubt, frustration, fear. Was he really as capable as everyone said? Did he deserve all this attention? Later that day, Bomani's best friend, Malik, stopped by after school. Malik had been with Bomani since kindergarten, a steady presence through all the ups and downs. He looked at Bomani with concern. "Man, you okay?" You seem different. Bomani hesitated but then opened up. It's like, I don't know if I can keep this up. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of superhero now, but I'm just me. I'm scared I'll mess up. Malik nodded. You know, even superheroes have their off days. Doesn't mean they're not heroes. That simple truth hit Bomani hard. Maybe he didn't have to be perfect. Maybe it was okay to be human. Encouraged, Bomani decided to take a step back. He told his family and his teachers that he needed some time to focus on himself, to find balance. It wasn't easy. Some people didn't understand, expecting him to keep pushing without pause. But Bomani knew this was necessary. One afternoon, he sat alone in the park near his house, the sun warm on his skin and the sounds of children playing nearby. He pulled out his notebook and started writing, not complicated equations, but his feelings, his fears, his hopes. He wrote about the weight of expectations, the loneliness fame could bring, and the desire to be seen not just as a genius, but as a boy with dreams, flaws, and a heart full of hope. That moment of honesty was a turning point. Bomani realized that the real breakthrough wasn't just solving math problems but learning to embrace his whole self, the successes and the struggles alike. With renewed clarity, he reached out to Mr. Caldwell, his math teacher, for advice on managing pressure and staying grounded. Mr. Caldwell listened and shared stories of his own challenges growing up, reminding Bomani that resilience wasn't about never falling but about getting back up stronger each time. Inspired, Bomani began setting small, manageable goals. He balanced his studies with time for friends, family, and his favorite pastime, basketball. Slowly, he found joy in the everyday moments that made life meaningful beyond the spotlight. He also started mentoring younger kids in his neighborhood more intentionally, sharing not just math skills but life lessons about perseverance and self-care. These interactions reminded him why he had started his journey, to inspire others to believe in themselves, no matter the odds. As the weeks passed, Bomani felt the heavy cloak of expectation lighten. He wasn't just carrying the hopes of a nation, he was nurturing his own dreams, learning that strength came from embracing vulnerability as much as brilliance. One evening, after a community workshop, a young girl approached him shyly. "Thank you," she said softly. "You make me believe I can do anything." Bomani smiled, feeling a deep sense of purpose. This was why he fought through the doubts and fears, to be that spark of hope for others. That night, as he lay in bed, Bomani reflected on his journey so far. The road hadn't been easy, but each challenge had taught him something invaluable. He wasn't just the kid who solved the impossible problem. He was a boy growing into his own strength, learning to carry the weight of expectations with grace. And he knew, without a doubt, that his story was far from over. The quiet after the storm of expectations was a welcome change for Bomani, but it also sparked a new kind of restlessness inside him. He had learned to breathe through the pressure and find peace in the ordinary, yet there was a hunger growing, a desire to push beyond the boundaries of his small world. The math problem that had captured Harvard's attention was just the beginning. Now, he wanted to explore what else was possible. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when Bomani was at the local library with Malik, flipping through a worn book about the history of science. The pages were filled with stories of pioneers, people who had changed the world by asking the questions no one else dared to ask. Bomani's eyes lit up as he read about Marie Curie's relentless pursuit of knowledge despite countless obstacles, and Nikola Tesla's visionary ideas that reshaped technology. Man, these people didn't just solve problems. They changed how we see the world, Malik said, watching Bomani's face glow with excitement. Bomani nodded, feeling a spark ignite within him. He realized his journey wasn't just about one problem or one achievement. It was about the endless possibilities that lay beyond the horizon. The idea that his mind could open doors no one else had opened before. Back at home, Bomani's room was filled with sketches, notes, and piles of books he had gathered over the months. His notebooks overflowed with theories and half-formed ideas. He was no longer just solving equations, he was dreaming bigger. One evening, his mother Karen sat beside him as he pored over a complex diagram he'd drawn, attempting to visualize a new concept related to renewable energy, a field he'd recently become fascinated with. "Bomani," she said softly, "you're thinking about the future. What made you shift your focus?" Bomani looked up, eyes sparkling. "I want to do more than just solve a math problem. I want to make a difference, something real that helps people and the planet." Karen smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "That's a powerful dream. And you have what it takes." Word about Bomani's new interest spread quickly. His community, proud and supportive, rallied around him. He was invited to speak at a local town hall meeting, where he shared his vision for clean energy solutions that could impact underserved neighborhoods like his own. The room was filled with curious faces, many of them skeptical, but Bomani's passion was contagious. Afterward, a woman named Dr. Elena Martinez approached him. She was a researcher at a nearby university specializing in environmental science. "Bomani, your ideas are impressive," she said. "If you're serious about this, I'd love to mentor you and help you connect with resources to develop your projects." This offer was a game changer. Under Dr. Martinez's guidance, Bomani gained access to labs, research materials, and a network of scientists and engineers. It was a new world, vast and full of challenges, but also full of potential. Balancing school and this new opportunity wasn't easy. Late nights became the norm as Bomani juggled homework, experiments, and community engagements. His family cheered him on but reminded him to take care of himself. "Remember to rest, Bomani," James advised one night, noticing the fatigue in his son's eyes. "You're not alone in this." Bomani's friendship with Malik also grew deeper. Malik, though not as academically inclined, offered a grounding presence, always ready with a joke or a basketball game to lighten the mood. Their bond was a reminder that success wasn't just about brains but about support and balance. As the months passed, Bomani began to present his findings at local science fairs and community events. His project on affordable solar panels designed for urban housing caught the attention of several foundations. They saw in Bomani not just a brilliant mind but a voice for innovation that was rooted in real-world impact. One day, as Bomani was setting up a demonstration, he caught the eye of a reporter from a national news outlet. The reporter was intrigued by Bomani's blend of youthful enthusiasm and scientific rigor. "What drives you?" she asked during the interview. Bomani paused, thinking carefully. "I want to show that anyone, no matter where they come from, can solve big problems. It's about hope and hard work. And knowing you're not alone." The story aired on evening news, shining a spotlight on Bomani's new project and his journey from a curious kid in a small neighborhood to an emerging innovator with the potential to influence national conversations on energy and equity. Despite the attention, Bomani stayed focused on his work. He knew the road ahead was long and filled with obstacles. The scientific process was never straightforward. Experiments failed. Ideas had to be refined. But each setback was a lesson. Dr. Martinez often reminded him, science isn't about being right all the time. It's about perseverance and curiosity. One particularly challenging moment came when a critical component of his solar panel prototype malfunctioned just days before a major presentation. Bomani was devastated. Months of work seemed to unravel in an instant. The night before the presentation, he sat alone in the lab, staring at the broken device, tears threatening to spill. Then, Malik called. "Hey man, remember why you started this. You're not defined by this one failure. You got this." Bolstered by his friend's words, Bomani stayed up all night working, rethinking designs, and finding creative solutions. The next day, he stood before the audience, nerves tingling but heart steady. The presentation went off without a hitch. The solar panel worked, and the crowd erupted in applause. That moment was more than just a triumph, it was proof that Bomani's spirit was unbreakable. He was no longer just the kid who solved a math problem that baffled Harvard. He was a young innovator shaping a future filled with promise. Despite the growing recognition and excitement surrounding Bomani's innovative solar panel project, doubt began to creep into the edges of his world. Both from others and within himself. Success had a way of bringing new challenges, ones that weren't just about science or invention but about navigating the complex, sometimes harsh realities of expectation, skepticism, and pressure. It started with a simple email. Bomani opened it after a long day of classes and research at Dr. Martinez's lab. The subject line read, "Concerns about your project viability." His heart sank as he scanned the message. It was from a grant committee who had been considering funding his work. They praised his enthusiasm and potential but questioned the technical feasibility of his design, citing the need for more rigorous testing and unproven scalability. In other words, they weren't ready to take the risk. Bomani stared at the screen, feeling a sting he hadn't expected. It was the first real rejection that hit close to home. He'd been used to support, to applause, even if at times he'd doubted himself. But this felt different. This was skepticism wrapped in polite language, a reminder that brilliance alone wasn't enough to guarantee success. He shared the email with Dr. Martinez the next day. She sighed, not with disappointment but with understanding. "Bomani, this is part of the journey. Not everyone will see the vision the way you do right away. That doesn't mean your idea isn't worth pursuing. But what if they're right?" Bomani asked quietly, doubt creeping in like an unwelcome shadow. "What if I'm not ready? What if this is all just a dream that's too big for me?" Dr. Martinez smiled gently. Every innovator faces doubt, especially when breaking new ground. What matters is how you respond. Do you let it stop you, or do you use it to sharpen your focus? Her words reminded him of the first time he solved that seemingly impossible math problem. He'd faced skepticism then too, from Harvard professors and even his own teachers. But he didn't stop. He dug deeper, asked more questions, kept pushing. That night, Bomani lay awake, replaying Dr. Martinez's words. He thought about his mother Karen's unwavering faith, Malik's steady friendship, and James's quiet encouragement. They all believed in him. Could he believe in himself the same way? Days passed with a new sense of urgency. Bomani threw himself back into his research with renewed determination. He ran simulations, redesigned parts, and tested materials over and over. Failure became a familiar companion, but so did resilience. Each setback was met with the question, how can I do better? At school, whispers circulated. Some classmates admired his work, others wondered if the attention was getting to his head. The pressure to maintain his image as a prodigy weighed heavily on Bomani. He found himself avoiding friends, isolating in the library or lab, chasing perfection. One afternoon, Malik found him hunched over a table strewn with circuit boards and schematics. "You look like you haven't slept in days," Malik said, plopping down beside him. "I'm just trying to get this right," Bomani replied without looking up. "If this doesn't work, if no one believes in me." Malik interrupted, "Hey, stop right there. No one's going to give you a pass just because it's hard. You've got to cut yourself some slack. You're still learning, man." Bomani laughed softly, grateful for the break in tension. "I guess I'm just scared. What if I'm not as smart as they think? What if I fail?" Malik nudged him. "Smart or not, you're real. And real people mess up all the time. What matters is you keep getting back up." That night, Bomani reflected on Malik's words. Fear wasn't a sign of weakness, it was part of growth. He decided to open up more, share his doubts with Karen and James, instead of carrying them alone. Their support was a balm he hadn't realized he needed. Meanwhile, the local community remained a steady source of encouragement. At a neighborhood event, Bomani presented his revised solar panel design. The crowd's energy was electric, fueled by hope and pride. After the presentation, a group of elders approached him. "Son, you remind us all why we keep dreaming," said Mrs. Reynolds, a retired teacher who had watched Bomani grow up. "Don't let doubt dim that light inside you." The warmth in her eyes was a powerful reminder that Bomani's journey wasn't just about personal success. It was about inspiring a community, showing young kids that obstacles were part of the path, not the end of it. Still, the biggest test came when Bomani was invited to present his work at a regional science symposium, an event that would bring together students, academics, and industry experts. The stakes were high. This was a chance to prove his design's potential on a much larger stage. In the days leading up to the symposium, Bomani balanced his usual workload with intense preparation. Dr. Martinez helped him refine his presentation, ensuring the scientific details were clear but accessible. She pushed him to anticipate tough questions, to be ready for critics. The morning of the event, Bomani stood backstage, heart pounding as the announcements began. He glanced at the faces in the audience, some familiar, many strangers. Some would doubt him. Some would expect perfection. When it was his turn, Bomani took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. He spoke with a calm confidence that surprised even himself. He shared not only the science behind his solar panel but also the story, the challenges, the failures, and the determination that fueled him. During the Q&A, the toughest questions came quickly. How would the panels perform under harsh weather? What about cost-effectiveness? Could this design really scale? Bomani answered honestly, admitting there were still challenges ahead. But he emphasized his vision, a future where clean, affordable energy was accessible to everyone, especially communities like his own. After the session ended, there was a long pause. Then, applause began, growing louder until the whole room was clapping. Several experts approached him afterward, offering advice and connections. Some even asked how they could support his work. That moment was a breakthrough. Not because all doubts disappeared, but because Bomani realized that skepticism was a sign that his ideas were being taken seriously. He also understood that progress wasn't about silence or perfection, it was about dialogue, persistence, and openness to growth. Back home that evening, Bomani sat with Karen and James, recounting the day's events. "I realized something," he said, "it's okay not to have all the answers. What matters is that I keep asking the questions." Karen smiled, squeezing his hand. "That's the spirit that will take you far." As Bomani looked out the window at the stars shining above, he felt a new sense of peace. Doubt would always be part of the journey. But so would hope, and the courage to keep moving forward, even when the path wasn't clear. This chapter of his life wasn't about a single victory. It was about becoming a young man who could face uncertainty with resilience, who could turn skepticism into fuel for innovation. And in doing so, Bomani was shaping not just his future but the future of countless others who dared to dream. The days after the regional science symposium brought a whirlwind of activity for Bomani. News outlets started picking up on his story, local newspapers, online blogs, even a segment on the morning news. For a 12-year-old kid from a small neighborhood, this was more attention than he had ever imagined. It was exciting but also overwhelming. Bomani found himself at the center of a ripple effect that extended far beyond the laboratory and school hallways. Invitations poured in, from community centers wanting him to speak, to technology firms curious about his design, to universities expressing interest in his work. The spotlight was bright, and suddenly, Bomani was not just a kid solving a problem but a symbol of possibility. But with every new opportunity came new challenges. The pressure to live up to expectations intensified. People began to watch him closely, waiting for the next big breakthrough or slip-up. It was a heavy mantle for someone still navigating the complexities of middle school. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting day juggling schoolwork, meetings, and interviews, Bomani sat quietly in his room, reflecting on everything that had changed in just a few months. His fingers absent-mindedly traced the worn edges of his notebook, the same one where he'd scribbled the initial sketches for his solar panel project. Karen walked in, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. She sat beside him and smiled gently. "You've been working so hard, Bomani. Remember, it's okay to take a breath." Bomani sighed. "Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. What if I can't keep up? What if this all fades away?" Karen's eyes softened. "Success isn't about never falling, it's about what you do when you fall. And no matter what, you're already inspiring people just by being you." Her words sank in, but Bomani also knew he had to find balance. Passion and purpose fueled him, but without rest and support, they could burn him out. At school, his friends noticed a change too. Malik pulled him aside during lunch one day. "You're doing big things, man, no doubt. But don't forget us regular folks. We're here for you." Bomani grinned. "Wouldn't have made it this far without you, Malik." Together, they hatched a plan. Bomani would start a science club at school, a space where kids of all backgrounds could come together, experiment, and dream. It was his way of giving back, sharing the joy and struggle of discovery with others. Launching the club wasn't easy. Securing funding, finding a teacher sponsor, and encouraging students to join required patience and persistence. But soon, a small group gathered in the after-school room, curious, eager faces ready to tinker and explore. During their first meeting, Bomani stood at the front, nervous but determined. "Science isn't just about knowing facts," he told them. "It's about asking questions, making mistakes, and never giving up. We're here to learn from each other and push the limits of what we think is possible." The room buzzed with energy. Kids who had never thought of themselves as science people were suddenly captivated. Some were shy, others outspoken, but all were united by curiosity. Word spread beyond school. Community leaders and local businesses took notice, offering supplies and mentorship. It became a hub of creativity and support, a testament to how one kid's dream could spark something much bigger. Meanwhile, Bomani continued refining his solar panel design. He worked closely with Dr. Martinez and a new team of volunteers who had come forward after seeing his work. Each day brought new challenges, technical glitches, budget constraints, conflicting opinions, but Bomani's leadership grew stronger. One evening, as they prepared for a demonstration at a city science fair, a critical flaw was discovered in the energy storage system. The batteries overheated under certain conditions, risking failure. The team scrambled to find a solution. Frustration mounted. Some volunteers suggested scrapping the current model and starting over, but Bomani refused to give up. "We've come too far to quit now," he said firmly. "Let's figure this out together." Long hours followed, filled with trial and error. Bomani's mind raced through possible fixes, adjusting circuits, swapping components, recalibrating sensors. His perseverance inspired the team to push past exhaustion and doubt. Finally, late one night, they achieved a breakthrough. The modified system passed rigorous tests, running safely and efficiently under all conditions. The relief was palpable. At the science fair, Bomani's presentation drew a large crowd. Reporters, teachers, students, and city officials listened as he explained the problem, the solution, and the journey. His honesty about setbacks and teamwork resonated deeply. Afterwards, Mayor Thompson approached him. "Bomani, your work is not just scientific innovation, it's a beacon for this city. We want to support you however we can." The mayor's words carried weight. Funding was promised for further development, along with opportunities to connect with experts and investors. It was a game changer. Despite the accolades, Bomani remained grounded. He knew this was one victory in a long race. The road ahead was still full of obstacles, technical, social, and personal. He also recognized the importance of community. None of this would have been possible without Karen's unwavering support, Malik's friendship, Dr. Martinez's mentorship, and the encouragement from neighbors and strangers alike. One afternoon, as he walked through the neighborhood park, Bomani spotted a group of younger kids playing with homemade rockets and robots. He smiled, remembering his own early experiments and the people who had believed in him. He approached them and sat down. "Want to hear a story about how I almost gave up but kept going?" he asked. The kids nodded eagerly. And so, Bomani shared his journey, the struggles, the doubts, the small victories. He spoke of how science was more than formulas and machines, it was about courage, hope, and the power of community. As the sun set, casting golden light over the park, Bomani realized his impact was no longer just about solar panels or inventions. It was about inspiring others to believe in themselves and their dreams, no matter the odds. The ripple effect was real. One kid's idea had grown into a movement, touching lives and opening doors. And Bomani was ready to keep swimming against the current, turning impossible into possible, one step at a time. The whirlwind of success that followed Bomani's breakthrough was thrilling, yet increasingly heavy. As news of his solar panel innovation spread beyond the city, it reached the ears of some of the most prestigious institutions in the world, including Harvard University. The very place that had once deemed his project impossible, now watched intently, waiting to see what the young prodigy would do next. Bomani felt a mixture of pride and pressure. The invitations to speak at conferences, attend workshops, and participate in research collaborations piled up. But more than anything, he felt the growing weight of expectations, not just from others, but from himself. It was late one evening in the Martinez family's cozy living room, where Bomani had spent countless hours brainstorming and working on his project. The soft hum of the city outside was a comforting backdrop to the quiet tension inside. Karen sat next to him, sensing the storm brewing in his mind. "You've been quiet all night. What's going on?" she asked gently. Bomani stared at his hands, fiddling with the edges of his notebook. "I keep thinking about what everyone expects me to do next. It's like the whole world is waiting for me to be perfect, to never make mistakes." Karen nodded, understanding the burden of being a young person suddenly thrust into the spotlight. "It's normal to feel that way. But remember, you're still learning, still growing. Nobody expects you to have all the answers right now." Despite Karen's reassurance, the doubts gnawed at him. Every time he sat down to work, a voice in his head whispered, "What if you can't top this? What if you fail?" The pressure wasn't just internal. At school, Bomani noticed the way some classmates treated him differently, admiring, yes, but also distant. A few peers seemed jealous or resentful, and even some teachers held him to a higher standard, sometimes unfairly so. One afternoon, during science class, a heated discussion erupted when Bomani suggested a new approach to an experiment. A classmate, Josh, interrupted sharply, "You think just because you're famous you know everything? We all work hard too." Bomani felt a flash of frustration but took a deep breath. "I'm not saying I know everything," he replied calmly. "I'm just sharing an idea. We're all trying to learn." The tension lingered, a reminder that success can isolate as much as it elevates. At home, the Martinez family rallied around Bomani, doing their best to keep him grounded. Dr. Martinez reminded him often, "Science isn't a race, it's a journey. Setbacks are part of that journey." Karen helped him carve out time for things outside of science, basketball games with Malik, family dinners, and quiet evenings reading comics or playing video games. These moments became essential to his sanity, little pockets where he could be just a kid. But the biggest challenge came from within. Bomani's own dreams grew bigger, and so did his fear of letting them slip away. One night, after hours in the lab, he sat staring at a blank whiteboard, trying to draft a new concept for an improved energy storage system. His mind, once brimming with ideas, felt suddenly empty. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered to himself. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Malik, "Game tomorrow. Need you on the court." Bomani smiled, grateful for the distraction. He texted back, "I'll be there." The next day, as he played basketball, something shifted. Running up and down the court, shouting with his friends, Bomani remembered why he loved challenges, not just scientific puzzles, but the simple thrill of pushing his limits. That night, he returned to his notebook with renewed focus. Ideas came slowly at first, then poured out, fueled by a blend of determination and hope. The breakthrough wasn't immediate. There were days when frustration returned, when experiments failed and doubts crept back. But Bomani learned to embrace the process, celebrating small wins and learning from mistakes. Outside of his personal struggle, the world around him was changing too. The media buzz had brought attention to the energy crisis in underserved communities, sparking conversations about equitable access to clean technology. Bomani became a reluctant spokesperson for this cause, invited to speak at town halls and community events. He shared not just his invention but also his vision for a future where technology could uplift everyone, not just the privileged few. One such event was held at a local community center packed with families, teachers, and students. Standing at the podium, Bomani looked out at the sea of hopeful faces. "Science is not just about gadgets or awards," he said, voice steady despite the nerves. "It's about solving real problems that affect real people. My project started because I wanted to help my neighborhood. That's why it matters." Afterwards, an elderly woman approached him. "You remind me of my grandson. He never believed he could do big things, but now I see that anything is possible." Her words moved Bomani deeply. It was a reminder that his journey was bigger than himself. It was about inspiring others to believe in their own potential. Back home, that night, Bomani sat with Dr. Martinez, reflecting on how far he'd come. "You've grown a lot," she said warmly. "Not just as a scientist, but as a person." He nodded. "I'm still scared sometimes. But I'm learning that's okay." Dr. Martinez smiled. "Fear is natural. What matters is how you face it." Bomani thought about the challenges ahead, his next project, the pressure of expectations, the responsibility he felt toward his community. But he also thought about the support around him, the friends who believed in him, and the dreams that fueled him. In that moment, he realized something essential: the weight of expectations didn't have to crush him. Instead, it could be the very thing that pushed him to grow stronger, to reach higher. And with that, Bomani felt ready to take the next step, not just as a young inventor, but as a leader in a world that desperately needed new ideas and new hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but he no longer feared the unknown. He was prepared to face it head-on, with courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief in the power of possibility. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind for Bomani. Invitations, interviews, and emails filled his inbox at an overwhelming pace. While the spotlight was exciting, it was also exhausting. With every new opportunity came new pressures, new expectations, and new challenges that no 12-year-old should have to manage alone. School became a balancing act between keeping up with homework, attending meetings with potential collaborators, and preparing for public appearances. His teachers were supportive, but Bomani could sense their unspoken doubts, wondering if a kid could really juggle so much and still succeed academically. Some students were openly curious, others envious or skeptical, and a few had started whispering about how different he'd become. One afternoon, as he sat in the library surrounded by textbooks and notes, Bomani's phone buzzed with a message from Karen: "Dinner tonight? Need your help planning something special." He smiled, grateful for the normalcy. Family was the one constant that kept him grounded, no matter how fast the world spun around him. That evening, at the Martinez home, Karen explained her idea. "With all this attention on you, I think it's time we give back, to your community, to the kids who might not know they can dream this big." Bomani nodded thoughtfully. "Like a workshop? Teach them about science and technology?" "Exactly. We could invite local kids, show them what's possible, and maybe spark their own curiosity." It was a simple idea, but powerful. Bomani remembered how much it had meant to him when Mr. Harris, his science teacher, had first encouraged him. Now it was his turn to pay it forward. Over the next few weeks, the Martinez family organized a series of community workshops called Bright Futures. Flyers went up in schools, libraries, and community centers. Local news stations caught wind and featured the event in their segments. Soon, families from all over the neighborhood were signing up. The day of the first workshop arrived, and Bomani felt a nervous excitement. The room buzzed with chatter as kids of all ages gathered, eyes wide with curiosity. Some came shy, others eager, but all were ready to learn. Standing in front of the crowd, Bomani took a deep breath. Science and technology aren't just for experts or adults. They're for everyone. Especially kids like us. He began with simple experiments, breaking down complex ideas into fun, hands-on activities. He shared stories of his own struggles and successes, hoping to inspire rather than intimidate. Among the crowd, Bomani noticed a girl named Aisha, about his age, who watched intently but didn't participate at first. After the workshop, she approached him quietly. "I want to learn more," she said softly. "But sometimes I feel like people don't expect me to do anything big because of where I'm from." Bomani smiled warmly. "I get that. But you don't have to wait for permission to believe in yourself. The only limits are the ones you put on yourself." Aisha's eyes brightened, and in that moment, Bomani realized this was bigger than just technology, it was about hope, empowerment, and breaking barriers. Meanwhile, back at school, Bomani's reputation continued to grow. But with recognition came scrutiny. Some adults questioned whether he was too young to handle such responsibility. A local academic journal published a critical editorial doubting the sustainability of his solar panel design. News outlets debated whether his work was a passing fad or a genuine breakthrough. Bomani felt the sting of criticism more than he expected. It was one thing to face doubts from peers, it was another to have experts question his integrity and potential. One evening, he confided in Dr. Martinez. "They're saying I'm just lucky, or that I don't understand the science deeply enough. Maybe they're right." She looked at him steadily. "Remember when you first struggled with the equations? You didn't give up then, and you won't give up now. Science is about questioning, testing, and proving. Let their doubt be fuel, not a barrier." Inspired by her words, Bomani doubled down on his research, diving into journals, reaching out to scientists, and refining his designs. He sought advice from mentors, learning how to handle criticism constructively rather than letting it discourage him. Amid this intense focus, another challenge arose. The manufacturing company that had offered to mass-produce his solar panels delayed the project due to concerns about cost and scalability. Bomani realized that invention alone wasn't enough, turning ideas into real-world solutions required negotiation, persistence, and strategic thinking. He started attending meetings with the company's engineers and executives, sometimes with Karen or Dr. Martinez. These sessions were filled with technical jargon, financial discussions, and complicated decisions, far beyond the classroom experiments he was used to. But Bomani was determined. He prepared presentations, asked questions, and learned the language of business and innovation. Slowly, he earned respect as more than just a kid inventor. Despite the setbacks, small victories kept him going. A pilot program launched in his neighborhood, installing his solar panels on community centers and schools. Local families reported lower energy bills and better power reliability. The impact was tangible. The Bright Futures workshops expanded, with Bomani traveling to nearby cities to speak and teach. Each trip was a reminder that his work wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about creating opportunity and inspiring others. One afternoon, during a talk at a school in a neighboring district, Bomani was approached by a young boy who reminded him of himself. "Do you really think I could do something like this too?" the boy asked, eyes hopeful. Bomani knelt down, meeting him at eye level. "Absolutely. You just have to believe it's possible and work hard. And remember, it's okay to ask for help." That moment crystallized everything Bomani had come to understand about his journey. Success wasn't just about solving problems or winning awards. It was about lifting others as he climbed, sharing knowledge, and building a community of dreamers and doers. As the year drew to a close, Bomani reflected on the whirlwind of change. The boy who once faced doubt and obstacles had grown into a young leader, learning to navigate complex worlds of science, business, and social impact. The road ahead remained uncertain. There were still skeptics, challenges, and moments of fear. But Bomani no longer felt alone or overwhelmed. With his family, friends, and community behind him, he had found a strength deeper than any formula or invention. One night, sitting at his desk, Bomani penned a message to his followers on social media. Never let anyone tell you what's impossible. Sometimes, it takes one voice, one idea, one kid to change the world. Keep dreaming, keep pushing, and remember, you're capable of amazing things. As he hit send, Bomani felt a quiet pride. Not just in what he'd accomplished, but in the journey still unfolding before him. The impossible was no longer out of reach. It was a challenge waiting to be met. The day started like any other, but Bomani sensed something different in the air. His phone buzzed with a series of messages early in the morning, each more urgent than the last. He blinked at the screen, a chill creeping down his spine as news outlets began releasing breaking reports that threatened to unravel everything he had worked so hard to build. It was an investigative piece from a respected science magazine, questioning the authenticity of Bomani's breakthrough. The headline was blunt and unforgiving: was Bomani's solar panel innovation really his own? Bomani's heart pounded. The article alleged that some of his designs were strikingly similar to patented work from a lesser-known engineer overseas. It suggested that Bomani's invention was less a breakthrough and more a repackaging of existing technology, cleverly marketed to inspire but lacking originality. At first, he felt disbelief. How could anyone doubt him after all the months of dedication, study, and hands-on work? But as he read further, his stomach twisted with each accusation. The article questioned not only his invention but his character, his family's involvement, and even his motivation. The online comments were brutal. Some fans turned cold, others accused him of being a fraud. Even some of his closest allies seemed hesitant, afraid to publicly defend him until more was known. Bomani's mother, Karen, sat beside him, her expression a mixture of anger and concern. "This is just a storm, Bomani. We'll get through it." But Bomani wasn't so sure. He felt exposed, vulnerable. Years of hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifices suddenly seemed overshadowed by doubt and suspicion. That afternoon, Dr. Martinez called for an emergency meeting. The team gathered in the small conference room at the lab, tension thick in the air. "We need transparency," Dr. Martinez began firmly. "Bomani, we're going to conduct a full review of your work, every prototype, every note, every design iteration. We will show the world the truth." Bomani nodded, determination creeping back into his voice. "I want to clear this up as much as anyone." For days, they pored over every detail. The process was grueling, emotionally exhausting. Friends and mentors offered support, but some avoided the spotlight, wary of the backlash. Throughout it all, Bomani learned to face criticism head-on. He answered questions honestly, never once hiding the mistakes or missteps along the way. He talked openly about how his invention evolved, how he stood on the shoulders of giants in the scientific community, and how every great discovery built upon past knowledge. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The review confirmed that while some components had similarities to existing technology, Bomani's unique application and the efficiency improvements he made were genuinely innovative. The narrative shifted from accusations to admiration for his ingenuity and perseverance. More importantly, Bomani's honesty and humility won back the respect of many who had doubted him. Interviews aired where he spoke candidly about the challenges, emphasizing that invention is rarely a solo journey. In the midst of the storm, Bomani received a message that lifted his spirits. Aisha, the young girl from the workshops, had shared a video online about how Bomani's story inspired her to pursue her own science projects. The comments flooded with encouragement, reminding him of the impact he had beyond the headlines. That evening, as Bomani sat with his family, Karen reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You did more than defend yourself today. You showed what true leadership looks like." Tears welled up in Bomani's eyes, not just from relief but from a profound realization. This moment, painful as it was, had shaped him into someone stronger, more resilient, and more committed to his purpose. Later that week, Harvard University, which had once declared the challenge impossible, publicly acknowledged Bomani's achievement. The prestigious institution invited him to speak at a special symposium, recognizing not only his scientific contribution but the spirit of innovation and determination he embodied. Standing at the podium months later, Bomani looked out at the crowd, scientists, students, reporters, and dreamers from all walks of life. He spoke about his journey, the obstacles, the doubts, and the triumphs. "Science isn't about being perfect," he said. "It's about trying, failing, learning, and trying again. It's about believing in the impossible, even when others don't." The room erupted in applause. For Bomani, this wasn't just a victory for himself, it was a message to every kid who had ever been told they couldn't. As he left the stage, Bomani felt a quiet sense of peace. The truth had set him free, and the future was wide open. The auditorium was buzzing with excitement, a sea of faces illuminated by the soft glow of stage lights. Bomani stood just behind the curtain, his hands slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of everything this moment represented. Months of struggle, hope, heartbreak, and triumph had all led to this night. He took a deep breath, recalling the long journey from that small neighborhood in Detroit where a curious 12-year-old first dreamed of solving what Harvard called impossible. Now, as the crowd awaited him, he felt the full circle of his story, a journey defined not just by invention, but by resilience, community, and belief. Stepping into the spotlight, Bomani's voice rang clear and steady as he addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for being here. This isn't just my story, it belongs to every single person who's ever been told no, every person who's been doubted, and every person who's refused to give up." His words filled the room with energy, and in that instant, Bomani was no longer just the kid who solved a problem thought impossible. He was a symbol of hope, a beacon for those who dream big despite obstacles. The questions from the audience were many: how he overcame doubts, how he handled the pressure, what kept him going during the toughest times. Bomani answered each with honesty and humility, crediting his family, teachers, friends, and community for their unwavering support. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Bomani sat alone backstage, reflecting on everything he'd been through. He thought of his mother, Karen, whose sacrifices had paved the way. He thought of his mentor, Dr. Martinez, who never stopped believing in him. And he thought of his friends, like Aisha and Malik, who stood by him through every challenge. But more than anything, Bomani realized the journey was far from over. The breakthrough was just the beginning. In the days that followed, offers poured in, from tech companies eager to partner with him, universities wanting him to speak, and organizations seeking his advice on inspiring young minds. Yet, Bomani was clear on one thing: his mission wasn't just about fame or fortune. It was about making a difference. He launched a foundation dedicated to empowering underserved youth in STEM, ensuring that other kids like him would have the tools and encouragement to explore their potential. His story became a rallying cry for equity and opportunity in education. Through interviews, school visits, and community events, Bomani shared one message above all: greatness comes from perseverance and heart, not just talent or luck. The world may call something impossible, but determination can turn the impossible into reality. Months later, during a quiet moment at home, Bomani opened a letter from Harvard. Inside was an official invitation. Not just to speak, but to join a new research initiative aimed at developing sustainable energy solutions worldwide. It was an acknowledgement of his unique perspective and undeniable contribution. Bomani smiled, understanding that recognition from the academic world was meaningful, but the real reward was the chance to continue growing, learning, and giving back. As he looked out the window at the city skyline, he thought about the future, not just his own, but the future of every child who dared to dream. The journey from that small idea to global impact had been filled with challenges, but it had also been filled with love, courage, and endless possibility. He whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." Outside, the world kept turning, problems waiting to be solved, barriers ready to be broken. And Bomani, the kid who once solved the impossible, was ready to face them all, one step at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?